Chapter 667. The third year and second month of the Dark Portal. The earth was still frozen, and there were no signs of life waking up. This was the most difficult time of winter. It was still winter, but almost all the food was gone. In the northern continent of Rotterdam, corpses of people who had frozen and starved to death could be seen everywhere. Due to the cold weather, there was no need to worry about the plague. However, the hard layer of ice made everyone give up on the idea of burying their companions or neighbors. The nobles of Rotterdam were celebrating the victory of the war in the warm castle. In Stormwind, the southernmost part of the continent, Lang was inspecting his territory with Prince William. Yes, braving the -5°C cold wind and light snow. As there were still remnants of the orcs in the depths of the elven forest, Lang had no choice but to bring more than 500 royal knights with him. Of course, there was no lack of paladins, priests, hunters, mages, and a few rangers from the Windrunner family. As they passed by the graveyard outside Gold's Higher town, a few frozen corpses jumped into Lang and William's sight. What's going on? Andoin, who was inspecting with Lang, felt a fire burning in his chest. Before he could get angry, his followers naturally summoned the terrified mayor of Gold's Higher town. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty. We didn't know you were coming." "Didn't know? Does that give you enough time to hide the body?" King Leon's words were laced with daggers, which made him look even more majestic. "It's not like that, Your Majesty. Your Majesty, please take a closer look. Most of them are elderly." The mayor, who was so scared that he wet his pants, tried to explain. Lang took a look and found that it was indeed so. Before they came back to the elven forest, their bodies were not in good condition. Everyone advised them not to come back, but they stubbornly said that they wanted to die in their hometown. "During the week of turbulence on the ship, we tried our best to take care of them. According to Sir Marcus's instructions, we kept them near the doctor or the priest. Unfortunately, they didn't make it." The mayor's explanation made Lang and the rest fall silent. Hometown had a special and sacred meaning to every citizen of Stormwind. Since the founding of the kingdom, thousands of years had passed, and many people had never left their homeland. During the days when Stormwind had fallen, even Lang himself had painfully wondered if he would ever have the chance to return to Stormwind, the land that had been passed down for generations. In the days after the fall, perhaps he and his people were eager to restore their country. What if he died in battle, and all the warriors who were determined to restore the country died in battle? What if it dragged on for 5 or 10 years and they still couldn't recover their country? By that time, how many people would be willing to support the restoration of Stormwind? Lang, Andoin, and even the young William could clearly understand the desire of the citizens, especially the elderly citizens, to return to their hometown. Lang sighed. In the cold winter weather, his sigh formed an icy mist that was incomparably clear. "Mr. Mayor, I accept your explanation. However, please take us to the place where the civilians gather. I will use my eyes to witness the results of your work and your loyalty to the kingdom and its people." "Of course. Of course." The mayor wiped the beads of sweat that had started to form on his face, and hurriedly led Lang and the rest into the town. As Gold's Higher town had once been the base of the Horde's attack on Stormwind City, and had been burned down by Duque, many of the trees still looked bare even after more than a year had passed. They were either dead or had yet to grow back. In the slightly deserted town, Lang was pleased to see many human-style houses standing tall in the town. A year and a half ago, the same place had been filled with the disgusting, dirty, and messy tents of the Horde. "Father, many of the houses here look the same," Prince William exclaimed in surprise. Lang was also very surprised. As the king, he had only seen reports from Duque about how many houses had been built. Regarding internal affairs reports, Lang had always looked at them with a watery eye. In Lang's impression, if a tenth of the houses could be built, it would be good if the rest of the people could have a sturdier tent. Now, it seemed that Duque's report was completely true, without a single bit of watery information. "Thanks to Grand Duke Marcus' new building manual, we were able to build a winter house for every household in the town before winter came, a total of 1,120 households. As long as there is a man in the family, even if he doesn't know how to build a house, under the guidance of a craftsman, a sturdy house can be built by 5 or 6 people in a month. Lang, Andoan, and William were all shocked. They knew nothing about building houses, but they had seen how carpenters and stonemasons built houses in the past. It was impossible to build a house in less than half a year. What kind of efficiency was this now? The mayor first brought the king and the rest to the warehouse. Many pieces of wood were stacked neatly in the warehouse. Lang noticed that there were grooves on both ends of each piece of wood. "This is," the mayor said, I don't know the specifics. Mr. Van Cleve from the Brotherhood of Stonemasons explained a lot to me. He said that as long as the pillars and beams marked with a specific number are placed at a specific location on the flat ground, they can be directly lapped up, and the nails on top can be used to make the frame of the house. The house will not fall apart easily. Then, a double layer of wooden planks is prepared in advance, and the house is basically built. That's it? Andoan was stunned. There's no way to use the stove for heating. This can only be built by the more idle women. Bring me to have a look, Lang ordered. After walking for a short while, the group arrived at a commoner's house at the edge of the town. They knocked on the door of the house, and the farmer welcomed the king and the rest in a panic. "You don't have to kneel, stand, and talk." In this era of strict hierarchy, it was a great blessing for the commoners to not have to kneel when they saw the king. They would not dare to sit together with the king even if they were beaten to death. "Thank you, Your Majesty," the man said in unison with his wife and 3 half-grown children. "Are you a soldier on leave?" Andoan noticed the man's necklace. There was a rectangular plate on the necklace, which was the idea that Duque had come up with, the military plate. The military plate was marked with the soldier's name, place of origin, affiliation, and meritorious service. The man immediately stood at attention in a standard military posture. "Captain Joseph Adams of the 5th Squad of the 3rd Brigade of the Kingdom's 5th Infantry Regiment salutes you, Commander Lothar." "How was the winter?" Lang asked with a smile. "Thank you, Saint Duque, we had a good time." Joseph's face changed almost as soon as he finished speaking. Saint Duque? Chapter 668. The mayor's face turned ghastly pale. Even if Leon had the reputation of being a wise king, who could guarantee that Leon wouldn't be jealous and resentful? How could he judge a subject as a saint in front of a king? That was a huge taboo. If it was in the past, no one would sigh for them even if they hung all the gossipers in the town on the spot. The mayor already wanted to kneel down and beg for mercy. Unexpectedly, King Leon raised his hand and raised his left palm, gesturing for them to stop. He did not care about Joseph, who had already knelt down in fear, nor did he care about the trembling mayor. Instead, he turned to Prince William and said, "Child, today I want to teach you the way of a king." "Father, please speak." "I'm listening." The little prince nodded seriously. To be a wise king, the first thing you have to do is never be jealous of a minister who is more talented than you. When it comes to war, I am far inferior to your uncle Andoan. He is the god of war in the hearts of the soldiers. I am not. When it comes to strategizing and internal affairs, I can't even learn a little bit about your brother Duque. I only know that under his management, my people are living a better life. Lang shrugged his shoulders and pursed his lips, making a funny expression. All right, if I was the kind of stupid king who couldn't bear to see his minister become a saint, should I behead Andoan and hang Duque, and then let the people send me to the stake? Oh, no, no. Before the people do anything, the women from the Windrunner family will first skin me alive. Oh. That's too bad. I might as well die in Storm Fortress. After hearing Ryan's words, Andoan, the ministers, and even the guards of the Wang family were all affected by Ryan's mischievous antics, and they all smiled in relief. They all knew Lang very well. This was a king who might not be the most capable, but his character was absolutely noble. You must absolutely trust the ministers who are good to the people, understand? For example, your uncle Andoan and brother Duque. William's eyes were filled with admiration. I understand now. Lang's behavior made the mayor and Joseph's family let go of their grudges, and they also opened up a chatterbox. Through their mouths, Lang truly understood how effective Duque's policy was. Since there was no need for war for the time being, Duque asked Lothar to order the army to take a break. More than 70% of the soldiers were given a break and were able to return to their hometown to participate in the reconstruction. There were only 2 requirements for these soldiers. First, they had to report back to the army after the spring plowing next year. Otherwise, they would be treated as deserters. Second, they had to wear their military tags when working in their hometown. This was to let everyone know that the kingdom had sent them back to help. With the return of a large number of able-bodied men, the reconstruction work was able to speed up. At the same time, due to the bountiful harvest of food in the western wilderness, the people did not have to worry about starving that winter. If that was all, Duque's name would not be sacred in the hearts of the people. Perhaps the story of Duque's bravery in fighting Nicerio was something that people in a country that worshipped martial arts relished. But for most commoners, it was just a topic of conversation after a meal. The only thing that could really make them smile happily was a stable and happy life. Originally, everyone had already prepared for the worst. In history, there had never been a great migration without a large number of deaths. The weak, old, women, and children would die of hunger, cold, or disease in the shortest time possible. However, as a transmigrator, Duque used his modern conventional medical knowledge to reverse all of this. The cement road that ran through the entire elven forest from east to west provided the most solid foundation for the transportation of supplies. Long before the recovery of Stormwind, Duque had Edwin van Cleve and Jirian Stallman prepare everything. Duque had perfectly considered every aspect of clothing, food, housing, and transportation. The first was winter clothing. There was cotton in Azeroth, and it had been set up early in the western wilderness. It allowed the Dark Portal to harvest 200,000 kilograms of cotton in the autumn of Stormwind in the second year of the Dark Portal. This was not an ideal number, but it could allow most women and children to live a relatively warm winter. The people of Azeroth still mainly wore linen clothes. In the past, they had to rely on the fire to warm themselves in the winter. When had they ever worn such warm clothes? Every person who put on a cotton-padded coat was full of praise for this new winter clothing that they called Duque's cotton-padded coat. In terms of food, in addition to the basic black bread, Duque also added a large amount of meat. The small fishing boats that could not travel long distances were sent out early in the morning. With the help of the Mare people, there was a constant catch even in winter. The high-fat whale meat and various fish were already ice cubes when they were sent ashore. Although it was a little heavy, it was better to keep them fresh. It could be transported from Stormwind Port to the East Elven Forest hundreds of kilometers away. People could add a delicious meal for their families at an extremely low price. During the Great Retreat, the people had lost almost all their belongings. Duque could not always distribute profits, because this would breed corruption and laziness. Therefore, Duque's solution was to provide relief through work. They were paid to build houses for their neighbors. They were paid to transport food and cotton-padded clothes for the village. They were also paid to make cotton-padded clothes for the women. They were paid to help make javelins. They were paid to take care of the lonely elderly or the sick and disabled. Soldiers on leave were paid to join the patrols. There was also a reward for killing wild beasts or orcs that invaded. As long as one could work and was willing to work, there was absolutely no need to worry about starving or freezing to death. Duque also stipulated that within 3 years, a minimum and maximum wage system must be implemented, and several profiteers who inflated prices were hanged. Moreover, taking advantage of the winter, when people could not work, the next year's farmland was distributed to each household early and seeds were distributed. In addition, because a large number of the old aristocrats had been completely wiped out, more than 90% of the people had become free people. Those who were newly appointed nobles because of their military exploits were strictly limited to the proportion of taxes. For a time, the mental outlook of the people of the country was refreshed. This was not only limited to Gold Flash Town. Lang and his group went all the way east, and it was the same at Blackwell Farm and East Valley Lumberyard. If there was any difference in different places, it was that in Duque's territory, the implementation of various policies was more resolute. Lang met the manager of the East Valley Lumberyard, Darnielle, and found that the former mage had become the director of a factory specializing in the production of magic items. The cold winter had not yet passed, but the hearts of every citizen were warm. They were looking forward to the arrival of spring. Because, that was the birth of a kingdom. The deceased Archbishop Alonso's Fail was a saint in the spiritual realm in the hearts of the people, and Duque was a saint in the material realm. Because of him, the people lived an unexpectedly good life. Therefore, his name became sacred in the hearts of the people. From this winter onwards, the people of Storm Country used to add the word saint in front of Duque's name. Chapter 669. At the same time, there were many cases of people freezing to death all over Lordaeron. Apart from the Tirisful Forest and the holy city of Stratholme, most of Lordaeron's territory had been ravaged by the orcs. The Silverpine Forest had been burnt to a crisp by the flame tactics. The eastern region, later known as the Eastern and Western Plague Lands, had been ravaged by the orcs before they attacked Cuel Salis. Almost no town was left unscathed. The people could only gather in their dilapidated houses and shiver in fear. According to the latest statistics, there were at least 100,000 people who had died this winter. Upon hearing this news, King Salas of Stormguard suddenly felt extremely lucky. He had also heard of Duque's method of building houses, but the unprepared people of Stormguard had no way of using it. Duque gave him a suggestion, forbidding the people from returning to the earthy highlands before spring. A large number of people were settled in the former Stormwind refugee camp in the Hillsbrad Hills. There, at least, they had almost perfect living conditions and stored food that could not be carried away by Stormwind. Although it was said to be stored food, it was actually the food that the Berev family had hidden in a secret place over the years. The Berev family was forced to leave their territory by Tarinas, but there were many things that could not be taken away. Since the Berev family was determined to follow Duque, the right to dispose of the food naturally fell into Duque's hands. Duque did them a favor and gave it to the people of Stormguard. Looking towards the south from Southshore, King Salas's cloak fluttered in the cold wind. He suddenly shouted, "Duque, we, the people of Stormguard, will remember this favor forever. Not for generations to come." Behind him, hundreds and thousands of warriors of Stormguard shouted in unison. "Forever in our hearts, not for generations to come." On the 15th of February, standing on the peak of the Riedridge Mountains, Lang suddenly asked, "Say, what is Duque doing now?" "Teaching students. I heard he made the little princess of Cuel Tira's vomit." Andoin shrugged. "So fast?" Not only Lang, but the ministers around him were also burning with curiosity. "No, it's because it's the first time I've seen blood," Andoin corrected. "Of course you'll see blood the first time." Lang had an expression that said, "We understand." Only the young Prince William was dumbfounded. He looked left and right, not knowing what these mysterious adults were talking about. "It's not what you think." Andoin realized that he had inadvertently made things worse. His face turned green, and he had no choice but to roar, "Go and find out for yourselves. I'm not going to bother about this." This time, Lang and the ministers were dumbfounded. "Duque, what the hell are you doing?" The Dark Portal 3, February 14th. A certain otaku with the surname Du, who had never even touched a girl's hand back then, swore to use his power to name February 14th every year as Lover's Death Day. Later, because a certain man had successfully won over the Windrunner sisters, he shamelessly used his power to bluff King Lang in January. "Oh, Lang. I always felt that the Stormwind population loss was too great. To nurture a qualified soldier, we must first have a qualified young man. It will take at least 16 years for a baby to grow into an adult warrior." "You mean to encourage childbirth?" "The ministers discussed it with me before, but didn't you say that the country could not provide more money to encourage childbirth?" "No, we don't need money. We can set February 14th as Valentine's Day. Apart from the soldiers on duty, all soldiers can have a day off." "Why Valentine's Day?" Lang was curious. Ah! In order to fight against the evil orc invaders, countless good men rushed to the battlefield without leaving a single man or woman behind. Many of them shed their blood on the battlefield, unable to return home to reunite with their beloved girls. Don't you think it's a great tragedy? Seeing Duque put one hand on his chest and the other stretched out like a bard reciting a poem, the corner of Lang's eye twitched. In order to deal with the tribe, this can't be helped. Yes. But at the end of the war, don't you think we should compensate our warriors well? At least 30% of our soldiers have to stay in the barracks or go out on patrol for the entire winter. You know, we have to maintain at least 100,000 standing soldiers for a long time in the future. Think about it. Tens of thousands of soldiers have been holding back for the entire winter, and then suddenly announced that they can go home to reunite with their loved ones. What would happen? The evil Duque smirked. Well, that image was too beautiful. Oh, it was too painful for the eyes. Lang, who had always been serious, could not help but facepalm. However, this era did not have the three gods of death on earth, Durex, Okamoto, and Jasper. These three gods of death had prevented billions of humans from being born. There had long been statistics on Earth. Starting from February, after 10 months, the number of babies born in December was the highest. Lang smiled bitterly and turned to look at Anduin, who was also rubbing his eyebrows. What do you think? Lothar could only answer with a bitter smile. In terms of military discipline, it's terrible, but in the long run, it's beneficial to the country, so I can only agree. Anyway, those brats down there will definitely cheer. Hence, on the 25th of January, Stormwind officially announced that the 14th of February would be Valentine's Day in the kingdom. There would be a total of 3 days before and after that, and the soldiers could have a holiday in advance or later. It was so that the brave soldiers could reunite with their loved ones after going through tough training and battles. In this era, professional soldiers had very few days off, and there were no fixed holidays. Most of them had served for more than 15 years. In ancient Rome on Earth, professional soldiers had to serve for 25 years before they could retire. Before Stormwind, more than a third of the men were sent to the army for the sake of the war. Although the war was basically over, most of the soldiers had signed an oath with the kingdom to serve as soldiers. Now that the announcement was made without any warning, the whole country cheered. Jaina arrived in Stormwind by ship on the 15th of January. On the surface, it was to become Lin Li's disciple, but in fact, Dai Lin had asked Jaina to come over with the intention of marrying off his daughter. Just the accompanying goods and servants alone took up 3 large ships, and there was also a team of 200 elite guards. Yes, there were also a few ceremonial officers. If anything really happened, the wedding would be held immediately. Duque protested sternly, saying that it was not becoming Lin Li's disciple, but selling his daughter. The 2 old foxes, Dai Lin and Lang, ignored him, and had a tacit understanding. On the 1st of February, a convoy of 80 carriages arrived in Karazhan along the newly built cement road. 2 weeks later, it was the official Valentine's Day of Stormwind. 14th of February, Valentine's Day. Sitting in the newly renovated reception hall in Karazhan, Jaina was wearing a well-tailored mage robe. She felt that something special would happen today. Although she had been left hanging for 2 weeks after arriving, the official announcement that Khadgar gave her today was that Duque was giving her her first lesson. Chapter 670. What was Valentine's Day? 13 or 14-year-old girls were at the age where they loved to dream the most. Prince Arthas was not bad, but that was all. Arthas, who had yet to officially step onto the stage of the Alliance, was compared to the legendary Saint Duque, who was deified by the people. Well, although the two were only 4 years apart in age, Arthas was doomed to be outclassed. The princesses of this era were pitiful. How to find a husband was a common problem for all kings who had princesses. Those who were high would be looked down upon by their own people. It was not easy to be on the same level as them, as people would always associate them with usurping the throne. In the past 1,000 years, 70% of princesses had to be exported and sold domestically. The remaining 30% either grew old alone, or eloped with a groom or a knight, and were then mercilessly destroyed by the king. Only 1 out of 100 were successfully married off. Jaina had worried whether she would be forced to abandon her magic talent, because a queen who knew magic would always be easily associated with witches. Duque was ideal. Duque, who was a radiant moon archmage, would not restrict her in any way on the path of magic. And Duque's exaggerated status was comparable to a kingdom's fiefdom and uncrowned king, so Jaina did not feel that she was marrying down. Although she did not know why she went there as a disciple, seeing how her father looked like he was marrying off his daughter, and after receiving enough courtesy from Lang in Stormwind City, she had many guesses about Duque, many of which were unrealistic. It could not be helped. Who told the two kings to reach a consensus while Duque was determined to resist? All kinds of wonderful misunderstandings arose. From the looks of it, Gianna was tricked. She arrived in Karazhan and was left hanging for 2 weeks. Fortunately, she was not grounded, and her best friend Alusia accompanied her for these 2 weeks. The two met in Dalajan, and their similar statuses made them naturally close friends. Although she was surprised that Alusia took a big detour to become a countess under Duque, the revival of her close friend's family still made Jaina very happy. When can I see Teacher Duque? The Grand Duke is very busy. The heavy responsibility of rebuilding the kingdom fell on his shoulders. It couldn't be helped. Most of the nobles with the ability to manage had perished in that shipwreck. Furthermore, the task of supplying the army of the blasted lands also falls on the Grand Duke. Alusia lied patiently. He was right. Alusia could not explain the almost natural resistance that Duque had towards Jaina. Duque had instructed Jaina before she arrived, I don't want to marry Gianna. Alusia, you and Jaina are good friends, right? Then hang her out for 2 weeks. As long as she doesn't leave my fief, you can take her anywhere you want. Moreover, at that time, Duque was hugging her waist and whispering in her ear. This was simply asking her to set up her best friend. However, Duque's declaration that he didn't want to marry Jaina warmed her heart. Whether it was logically her vassal should first pledge her loyalty to the Grand Duke, or the relationship between the two of them almost broke through the last hurdle, both drove her to help Duque set up Jaina. In the end, even though she knew that Duque was actually teaching Ronin in the depths of Karazhan's library, Alusia stubbornly said that she did not know. Then, she took Jaina and a group of followers to stroll around the East Elven Forest. However, after witnessing a series of miraculous policies that Duque had used to help the people survive the cold winter, Jaina's impression of Duque had increased. He's not only a powerful mage and an extraordinary commander, he's also a great ruler. The young princess did not hide her admiration for Duque. Alusia held her forehead and sighed in her heart, I'm just following your orders. I don't care what happens next. On the night of the 13th of February, when the Einarjar mage Khadgar came to inform Jaina, Jaina was pleasantly surprised and a little anxious. She had a feeling that this new Valentine's Day was very likely prepared for her. However, Khadgar repeatedly emphasized that the first lesson tomorrow was practical magic, which made Jaina very confused. Isn't tomorrow the new Valentine's Day, set by Stormwind? Jaina tried to get more information from Khadgar. Khadgar shrugged, so what if it is? I'm only responsible for informing you. Then, Mr. Khadgar, do you have any suggestions for me? Even though the intelligent Jaina did not know how to bribe a ghost, she still tried her best. All right, I can only tell you that Master Marcus has never been an academic mage. With that, Khadgar bowed and left the room. Jaina was in a dilemma. She had no idea what to prepare for the next day. The Jordan magic staff was a must. There was a large magic crystal on the tip of the staff and 4 small crystals revolving around it. As an earth mage, it was currently the best staff she could use. What troubled her was what kind of magic robe to wear. Jaina almost subconsciously picked up the insight magic robe. The moment she picked it up, her pretty face turned red. After trying it on, Jaina made a sexy S-shaped pose in front of herself in the mirror. She was immediately defeated by herself. It's too embarrassing. It was a dress, but the upper body only had a gold embroidered bra, and a golden belt covered the belly button from the center of the chest all the way to the waistline. Apart from that, there was nothing else on her upper body. Her slender waist and smooth back were completely exposed to the air. Her lower body seemed more proper, but upon closer inspection, there were long openings on both sides of her thighs. Not only were her thighs completely exposed to the air, but as long as she walked a little wider, there was a chance that her breasts would be exposed. After changing no less than 10 robes, on the 14th of February, Jaina finally appeared in front of Duque wearing a pure white, mooncloth robe, embellished with sapphires. The robe looked very dignified and elegant, but the exposed shoulders, accompanied by the brilliant golden hair scattered on the white robe, still showed off the unique beauty of a young girl. Fortunately, she changed. Otherwise, if she really wore the insight magic robe, Duque might really practice what it meant to make a profit every 3 years and never lose money. In the gorgeous Karazhan library, the moment Jaina saw Duque, her heart jumped violently. She was scared because she saw the scimitar that her father gave him at Duque's waist. Very good. Today's first lesson, I want you to know that the identity of a princess is meaningless. Chapter 671. Shock and unease froze on Jaina's beautiful face. Just from Duque's aura and gaze, Jaina knew that the person standing in front of her was her teacher, not her husband, Duque. What the hell? Duque is for real? It was not that Jaina did not think that Duque would be for real, but in her estimation, the probability was less than 1%. Even though she knew that her beauty was not necessarily better than Duque's rumored lovers, the Windrunner sisters. However, Jaina, who grew up in a royal family and was influenced by the nobility, still believed that she would be Duque's only choice in marriage. Now it seemed that she was wrong. She did not know why Duque looked at her with such resistance. She did not know if it was her fault or something else. Anyway, at this moment, Duque had completely put himself in the role of a strict teacher. Her identity as a princess was meaningless. Jaina almost wanted to refute Duque on the spot. However, she recalled the recent battle at the Dark Portal. Alterac had been destroyed, Silvermoon City had almost been taken over, and Stormwind and Stormguard had been destroyed. They had only managed to revive their countries. Jaina immediately understood what Duque meant. If there was no country behind her, then the so-called princess was just a meaningless princess of a destroyed country. Jaina's expression froze. Duque was right. Since ancient times, there was no kinship in the royal family, and the road to kingship was always filled with cruelty. Others only saw the glory of being a princess, but who would know her bitterness and helplessness if they were not at her level? Someone as smart as she already knew that her seemingly perfect marriage was actually because she was expelled from the core of Kultiraz's power. Jaina fell silent, and for a moment, she had the thought of retreating. Since ancient times, all the princesses of the 7 kingdoms had married outside, and all of them had died of depression. If she returned to Kultiraz, no. If she really went back, even if she had to find a plausible reason. To Kultiraz, she would be a disgrace. Just look at Princess Kalia. Fortunately, she was killed. Otherwise, the fact that she was once the fiancée of Deathwing was enough to make King Tarinas want to ban her for life. Yes, if she returned, Kultiraz would not protect her. Although she was very talented in magic and had great potential, she was still far from Duque, who stood at the peak of the alliance and was destined to become a Breaking Dawn mage. After thinking for a while, Jaina immediately made a decision. With the staff in hand, Jaina bowed respectfully. Teacher Marcus, my surname is meaningless. In front of you is only Jaina, who came to learn the mysteries of magic. It was a perfect and flawless answer. Duque narrowed his eyes. He could not help but sigh at the astonishing inertia of history. Jaina's intelligence and talent were indeed astonishing. In just 3 seconds, she had realized the situation she was in and quickly found her position. Duque used the identity of Dai Lin's teacher to suppress Jaina, and in the blink of an eye, Jaina became a student. From the look in her eyes, she had already made up her mind to learn magic to protect herself first. Damn it, she was only 13 years old. As for Ronan, who had experienced many battles but lacked knowledge, Duque could let her soar in the sea of knowledge in the Karazhan Grand Library. As for Jaina, Duque decided to educate her in a way that could very likely change the course of her life. Alright, since you understand, I won't emphasize it anymore. Duque raised his face. I'm different from Great Wizard Antonidas. Strictly speaking, he belongs to the academic faction, but I think I'm a classic example of a practical one. I've improved more than 100 spells, all of which were adjusted in actual combat. The number of beast men that died by my hands is also in the 5 digits. Duque was not making things up. At this point, he had already mastered countless metamagic abilities. However, not every metamagic ability was suitable for him, and not all the time. For example, the abilities that increased mana consumption to increase the power of spells. In the past, when his mana was low and his mana recovery was too slow, he had to use them according to the situation. Now that he had advanced to Radiant Moon, he could use them whenever he wanted. The system was adjusting Duque's spells all the time. This was how there was Duque, who was invincible in group attacks on the battlefield. After killing a lot, there would naturally be a murderous aura. It wasn't that there had to be vengeful spirits haunting that person, but it was a kind of indifference to life, even cruelty. Duque just stood there, and under the pressure of his aura, Jaina couldn't help but take half a step back. And Duque took a big step forward, his heavy footsteps weakening the pride in Jaina's heart. Duque suddenly asked, actually, His Majesty Rin doesn't mind me being made a king. Do you know why I didn't? Jaina found that she actually didn't dare to breathe. I don't know. The Burning Legion has already begun to move against the world of Azeroth. From Sargeras controlling Medivh to open the Dark Portal, to kill Jaden's deputy attacking Karazhan not long ago. In just 3 years, the world of Azeroth has experienced 2 major crises of destruction. Jaina hugged her, Jordan's staff, and couldn't help but nod. I have foreseen that the evil power that transcends the mortal world will descend rapidly. In the face of the terrifying power of the demons, worldly power is meaningless. So what if it's as powerful as Rotterdam? Maybe within 10 years, Rotterdam will become history, and the great Rotterdam will also become a ruin. When Duque said this, Jaina shivered, and she had goosebumps. She really couldn't imagine the destruction of the beautiful Rotterdam. She really wanted to refute Duque and say that it was a ridiculous rumor. However, Stormwind City had fallen, Torrential Fortress and Broken Ridge had been destroyed. Even the Rotterdam Palace had been demolished by the wings of death. This was unimaginable 100 years ago, no, even 5 years ago. Jaina could only nod. Fraud Du continued, the only thing that can protect the world of Azeroth from the hands of the demons is the same power that transcends the mortal world. The one who can give you a sense of security is not a man, not a powerful Grand Duke, nor a prince of a big country. Remember, the only thing in your hands is magic. Jaina was extremely surprised. Even now, she couldn't believe that this was said by the person who was supposed to be her husband. However, she had to admit that if even the kingdom couldn't be trusted, then only magic could save her. At this time, Duque suddenly grabbed Jaina's wrist, and a strange magic wrapped around both of them. Teleportation. When Jaina recovered from the dizziness of the long-distance teleportation, she was shocked to find herself in a world of ice and snow. Chapter 672. Whoosh. It's so cold. The biting cold wind made Jaina shiver. Even though she was a mage who specialized in ice magic, she couldn't help but shiver when she suddenly came from the warm Karazhan living room to the cold north. She was wearing very little. It was mid-February, and the harsh winter had yet to recede. The mountains and trees in the distance were all covered in white. Apart from the mountains, there were only trees. For Jaina, who had no experience in surviving in the wild, it was like she was at a loss. Jaina was a little confused. Where was this? At this time, Duque's voice sounded in Jaina's ear. Ah! This gave Jaina a shock. At the same time, the sleeveless design of the moon cloth robe was a trap for Jaina. She couldn't help but almost instinctively hug her other arm and rub it hard. This is the northern mountainous area of the Tirisful woodland. Duque's blue and white mage robe fluttered in the cold wind. The terraceful woodland? The clever Jaina suddenly thought of something, and her little face instantly turned pale. Yes. The first lesson I'm giving you is survival. How to survive in this world that will soon become incomparably terrible. The requirements for the first lesson are not high. With your current equipment, you can survive in the terraceful woodland infested with orcs for 24 hours. What? When Jaina heard this, she almost cried out in grievance. Letting a little girl like her, who had never lived independently, stay in the dangerous forest of orcs for 24 hours without winter clothes, food, assistance, or any heating equipment. Wasn't this bullying? Tears quickly gathered in the corner of Jaina's beautiful eyes. That pitiful appearance, for a moment, almost made Duque's heart soften. But the best actor was still the best actor. Duque pretended to be magnanimous and asked, "Are you afraid?" "Yes." Jaina suddenly looked up, and a hint of surprise flashed in her wronged eyes. "Oh. So Duque was just giving me a show of strength to scare me." Duque waved his hand, and after a short incantation, an illusory portal as tall as a person opened. Just as Jaina was about to step in, her body suddenly froze as if she had been hit by a petrifying spell. Jaina would recognize this scene even if she turned into ashes. On the other side of the door was Kul Tiras. "As long as you promise to tell His Majesty Proudmoore that you don't want to learn from me, then you can walk through this door, return to your warm home, and be your Princess Ku Tiras." Duque spoke very slowly, but each word was like a knife that cut into Jaina's heart. It wasn't that no one had reminded Jaina that Duque didn't like her and didn't want to marry her. He didn't even want to take her as his disciple. However, the smoke glove that even Antonidas was envious of made the young Jaina forget about it in her excitement. Now it seemed that it was true. "That's right, I can go back, but what about after I go back?" He came under Duque's command in the name of becoming his disciple, but he was chased away because he couldn't endure the tough training. It would be strange if her father didn't skin her alive for this kind of humiliation. In the future, let alone Antonidas, no archmage in Dalajan would accept her as a disciple. Thinking of this, Jaina's mouth was full of bitterness. Did she have a choice? Jaina bowed impeccably and used a respectful tone. "No, Teacher Marcus, I am your student. I came to Karazhan to receive your teachings. If you think that survival in the wild is very helpful for my growth, then I accept your trial. 24 hours, right? I hope you can come and pick me up on time." "I promise to be on time in 24 hours. Duque raised his chin. "One more question." "Ask." "What if there's a danger that I can't handle? Do you remember your brother Drake's coming of age ceremony when he was 16? Your father only gave him a dagger and pushed him into a pool with an adult shark." Jaina had goosebumps. When she was a child, she grew up listening to the great achievements of her father and brother. Only when she was a little older did she understand how dangerous it was. In the face of a shark's attack in the sea, the only way to survive was to use the dagger to stab the shark's nose the moment the shark pounced, then use the dagger to twist the shark's head so that the body could escape the shark's bite range. Otherwise, if the shark's sharp teeth grazed the body, the skin would be torn open on the spot, and the wound might even get infected and die. Jaina's whole body was trembling, but after a few seconds, she finally calmed down and bowed again. "I understand, teacher. May I ask one last question?" "Yes." "Did you experience something similar back then?" "Yes." "Then I have no problem. What you can do back then, I can also do." Jaina's blue eyes flashed with determination. "Very good," Duke said and disappeared in front of her with a teleportation. "It's so cold." Jaina exhaled a mouthful of white fog and realized that she had to find some clothes first. Otherwise, she would freeze to death in less than an hour, not to mention 24 hours. The only good thing was that she was wearing standard made shoes today and not high heels for banquets. At least when faced with bad mountain roads, she would not be so desperate that she had to take off her shoes to walk. In a cave on the mountainside 500 meters away, looking at the dazed Jaina in the snow, a beautiful elf combed her golden hair that had been messed up by the wind. She turned back and smiled. Duque, you're really cruel. You think so too? Aurelia. Aurelia laughed. This is too cruel for a 14-year-old girl. Don't you know? Today is her birthday. Pfft. Jaina's birthday is Valentine's Day? What the hell is this? Duque really did not know if this was how it was in the original history, or if it was because he had transmigrated that he had become like this. Alright, she could hate if she wanted to. It was better than her following the original trajectory of becoming a girl who sold her father. Duque pulled Aurelia into his arms, feeling the female elf's warmth. Jaina is undoubtedly a true genius. She has the talent to grow to become a Breaking Dawn wizard. But there is no lack of geniuses in this world, and only 1 in 10,000 can reach the peak in the end. The female elf's eyes flickered. Because geniuses all die from their own pride, laziness, or misfortune on the path of growth? Yes. That's not right either. I just don't want her to become that terrible woman who sold her father and the Alliance. Below, Jaina turned in a daze in the cold wind. Suddenly, she was pleasantly surprised to see smoke. The rising smoke could be seen clearly even from several kilometers away. Chapter 673. Someone's there. Looking at the rising smoke drifting into the distance, Jaina's heart was ignited with a raging flame of hope. That's her life-saving straw. The moon cloth was very tough, and Jaina could not tear it to make herself more agile. She could only pull the hem of the robe that was almost touching the ground to her thighs. Because she did not know how to tie a knot, she could only hold the staff in one hand and the robe in the other as she hastened her pace. The cold wind seeped into the robe, and Jaina felt even colder. Bastard Duque. Bastard Duque. How dare you treat me like this? It's fine if you don't want to marry me, but if you do, I swear I will take revenge on you. However, no matter how much she cursed in her heart, it was useless. In the winter forest, there was nothing but silence. There were no insects, no birds chirping. Other than the sound of the wind that sounded like the wailing of ghosts, there was no other sound. At first, Jaina was still wondering if she should move forward cautiously, but the cold wind was like a whip lashing at her back and her exposed arms. If she did not rub herself, a thin layer of frost would form on her arms in just 2 minutes. Jaina ran wildly in the rugged forest. Because she was not agile enough, she fell down no less than 5 times. However, her instinct to survive was urging her to continue running. Closer. Closer. It was getting closer. She saw the smoke drifting into the distance getting thicker and thicker. What a big fire. Is this a bonfire party? But it's broad daylight now. Jaina could already see the road. It was a forest path that the villagers had walked for countless years. Although it was not comparable to the Daligen's perfect fancy tiles, nor could it compare to the so-called cement road that traversed the entire elven forest, it was many times better than the bumpy forest filled with tree roots and gravel. Finally out of the forest, the view in front of her suddenly opened up. Hello. Is anyone here? Yes. Jaina immediately covered her mouth with her empty left hand, and tears of panic flowed uncontrollably from her eyes. Someone. But they were all dead people. In front of Jaina was a hellish scene. This was obviously a village that had been attacked not long ago. Because it was winter and the wind was against the wind, Jaina couldn't smell the stench of rotting corpses. But now, her vision, smell, taste, hearing, and skin were all at the same time, giving her a shock that exceeded her psychological limits. The burning house still had embers that had not been extinguished, and black smoke billowed out of it. The gate that had been forcefully smashed through was a huge human figure. There were also some scattered food on the ground. It was a mess everywhere. Because of the ice and snow, every corpse maintained the appearance they had when they died. Their fear, anger, and unwillingness before death were all frozen on their faces. There was still a small piece of green skin in the loyal domestic dog's mouth, but the rest of the body below the head had been eaten clean by the battle wolf. The old man who raised his pitchfork to protect his old boss had his head crushed. The father, who had clearly been chopped in half, used the last of his strength to reach out and grab his wife and son. The mother who was hugging her child had half her body smashed by a heavy weapon. A baby who had been gnawed by an ogre until it no longer looked like a human. These were all done by the orcs. Jaina saw an orc corpse covered in wounds. Beside the corpse were 7 or 8 fallen militia. It seemed that this was the only achievement of the village's militia. The lack of food forced the Warsong orcs hiding in the depths of the forest of Tirisful to attack the human settlements in the forest. She could no longer control herself. Blurg, blurg. The bread, pastries, and fragrant milk that she had eaten early in the morning were all vomited out by Jaina. For the first time in her life, Jaina felt so uncomfortable. The churning feeling in her stomach made her feel like she was going to vomit last night's dinner. After vomiting for a while, until her stomach was empty, until she felt the coldness of death again, Jaina realized that if she did not do something, she would very likely become a cold corpse like them. I have to do something, Jaina told herself. Resisting the nausea and discomfort, Jaina stood up and forced herself to enter this shuraba to find anything that could help her survive. The orcs took almost everything that could be eaten. They rudely broke into every room and smashed open the basement of every house. Because of their huge size, they burst every door, turning every house into ruins full of holes. Fortunately, Gianna found 2 thick blankets in a cupboard under the stairs, and then under one of the beds she found 2 hunks of brown bread that she had never looked at before. She did not know how to make a living with flint, but fortunately, she was a qualified earth mage. She came to a messy basement, piled up the wooden blocks, and started a fire with a fireball spell. Then, she put a blanket under it and wrapped herself in it. It was a little warmer this way. After an unknown amount of time, she could no longer hold back her hunger. Finally, she boiled snow water in an iron pot and cracked open the black bread. After soaking it in the water, she forced herself to swallow it. She would probably never forget the terrible taste for the rest of her life. In a daze, she fell asleep. She was woken up by the noise. Is anyone here? Is anyone still alive? The standard Lordaeran accent was not something the orcs could imitate. Jaina rushed out of the cellar in surprise and saw a group of Lordaeran cavalry. Praise the holy light. The leader was obviously a holy knight. He had already given up hope for this destroyed town. He did not expect to find a survivor, and it seemed like it was the first noble lady. Oh! Thank you, Ancestor Sorodin. Jaina was also very excited. She had long forgotten about surviving for 24 hours. How did you? Before she could greet him, Jaina suddenly heard a strange, small sound. Whoosh! Less than half a meter in front of Jaina. A cavalry beside her was shot in the neck by a wooden spear that came out of nowhere. The impact of the spear was so strong that Jaina watched in shock as the tip of the spear entered from the left and came out from the right. It almost broke the cavalry's entire neck. Looking at the tilted head and feeling the warm blood from the wound on the cavalry's neck, Jaina finally could not help but scream. Ah! The holy knight raised his shield and blocked another spear. He shouted, "Orcs!" This was Jaina's first Valentine's Day in her life, and it was also a bloody Valentine's Day. Chapter 674. Countless orcs suddenly jumped out of the snow outside the town. They shouted in the orc language that humans could not understand, and roared as they charged towards the Rotterdam cavalrymen that consisted of only about 60 people. Apart from the orcs, there were also many slender, white-skinned frost trolls. If not for that round of spear-throwing just now, the cavalry could have broken out of the encirclement with their warhorses. Unfortunately, at least 70% of the warhorses were pierced by the spears, and they neighed in pain in a pool of blood. The remaining cavalry had no choice but to use their warhorses as cover and form a circular formation to resist. If it was a battle on the battlefield, 100 orcs and trolls against 60 highly mobile cavalries, the outcome of the battle would still be unknown. When the cavalry was forced to become infantry, and had to use the smaller kite shields of the cavalry to form a circular formation, the outcome was decided. Jaina was sprayed with blood, and she was completely stunned. Some people would scream hysterically in the face of danger. They could not do anything, and would even disturb their companions, making a mess of things. Some people would show extreme survival instincts at such a moment. Like a drowning person, they would grab onto anyone they could grab, and crave for a chance to survive. There were also some people who would become calm and decisive after extreme panic. There was one last type of person who could guide their companions out of a predicament that would lead them to death. The last type of person was extremely rare, and people often called them generals. It was obvious that Jaina Proudmoore was a natural commander. In just a second, Jaina came to her senses, and shouted, "Go to the church. The church is made of stone." The paladin who was the leader suddenly understood what Jaina meant. Jaina's judgment was correct. If they did not have suitable defensive measures, the 60 of them would basically die in a single charge from the orcs. Hiding in the cellar was useless. Firstly, the cellar was not that big, and secondly, the orcs' demolition ability was beyond the imagination of most people. The orcs did not even need to use hammers to demolish houses made of ordinary bricks and wood. They could just knock it down with their arms. The so-called defense of a fortified position did not work on the orcs at all. The church was different. For some reason, the church in this town was made of bluestone, and was rather sturdy. Go. Listen to this lady. It would take the orcs at most half a minute to rush from the outskirts of the town to the town. They would be able to get there in a daze. Jaina's shout was definitely a life-saving move. The cavaliers of the Rotterdam Kingdom supported their teammates, and almost rushed into the church in the middle of the town before the orcs surrounded them. Blarg. Jaina wanted to vomit again. The church was a sacred place for the people of Lordaeron. People would naturally come to the church to seek salvation in times of danger. Unfortunately, the orcs had turned this place into a cruel slaughterhouse. Even though the corpse was already frozen, the smell of blood that had just splashed onto Jaina's body stimulated her sense of smell. None of the cavalrymen blamed this seemingly delicate young lady because she had already saved their lives. Some of the cavalrymen dragged the injured comrades deeper into the church, while the uninjured cavalrymen quickly formed a two-layered shield formation at the entrance of the church, which could accommodate 4 people abreast and was as tall as 2 men. Thank the holy light. Thank you, wise lady. The orcs were still aggressive, but compared to setting up a formation in the middle of the town, which had a complicated terrain, the church that only needed to defend the front door was simply a holy land. There was also a side door made of bluestone that could only allow 1 human to pass through. 2 of them were enough to guard the door tightly. The orcs immediately launched an attack on the human soldiers of the church. They smashed their huge hammers over, and even with the defense of the shields, they easily broke the arm of a cavalryman. As the price, the orc died in the next moment after being stabbed by at least 7 swords of the knights. The tragic battle was going on, and the cavalrymen were constantly injured and dragged into the church by their companions. However, there were more orcs who had fallen. The cavalrymen, who were obviously veterans of the war, were extremely brave. In just 5 minutes, they had killed more than 30 orcs, and only 7 of them were lightly injured, while 3 of them were seriously injured. However, there were more orcs outside. The green heads were densely packed, forming a surging green ocean. It seemed that there were at least hundreds of orcs here. A cavalryman with a broken arm took out a short-barreled flintlock and fired a shot into the sky. Accompanied by an ear-piercing sound, a dazzling red signal flare soared into the sky. It could be clearly seen even 10 kilometers away. Looking at Jaina's blank expression, the cavalryman smiled. The thing sent by the Stormwind people is called a signal flare, which is specially used by our alliance to call for help. Although we don't like that damn Duque, but the thing he invented is still useful. Another cavalryman, who could no longer stand, panted and laughed. Come on, we still have to wait for the Stormwind elven women to come and save us. Elven women? Jaina did not react for a moment. The elven rangers belonging to Grand Duke Marcus of Stormwind. Although their noses are pointed at the sky, they are absolutely strong in forest battles. Our people won't be able to make it in time, so we have to see if there are any elven rangers in the vicinity. If there are no reinforcements, we won't last until nightfall. The cavalryman with a broken arm smiled bitterly. Jaina gritted her teeth. That's not necessarily true, I'm still here. You. Under the disbelieving gazes of the cavalryman, Jaina gritted her teeth, rolled up the hem of her mooncloth robe, took a step forward with her fair and tender legs, and stood on the back of the church's pew. Be careful of the troll's spears. Before the cavalryman finished speaking, he was stunned to find that there was an illusory translucent cover around Jaina. Holy light, she's actually a Sir Wizard. The cavalryman guarding at the front also suddenly noticed the flames coming from behind them. Before they had time to turn their heads, a cold female voice sounded, "Fireball." Asterisk bang. Asterisk with a loud sound, a huge fireball with a long tail of flames flew over the cavalryman's shield formation and exploded in the midst of the densely packed beastmen. Ah, aoo. The beastmen were clearly in an uproar. They watched in horror as several of their companions struggled in the flames and rolled on the cold ground. Some beastmen tried to help their companions put out the flames. They very professionally took off their animal skin clothes and patted them on their companions' bodies. This was useless. Before the fire weakened a little, the burning beastmen had already returned to the embrace of their ancestors. Asterisk bang. Asterisk another fireball. This time, 4 or 5 beastmen were hit. Their screams in the flames terrified their companions. Chapter 675. Unknowingly, the orcs began to disperse. Hooray! Praise you, great Ms. Mage. The cavalryman's morale was greatly boosted. Who would have thought that the dainty noble lady they saved would be a mage? The leader of the paladins said, "Thank you for buying more time for us." Just to buy more time? If there's only one entrance, I can guard it for 3 days and 3 nights. Feeling the terrifying magic damage and mana recovery bonus of the smoke glove, Jaina decided to use a wall of fire to resist the orcs' attack. In fact, Jaina did just that. After 5 seconds of chanting, a huge wall that was 10 meters wide and 2 meters tall appeared in front of the church. More than 20 orcs were immediately affected by the flames and turned into burning human-shaped torches. The cavalryman cheered, but the paladin smiled bitterly. Why? Do you have a problem with my magic? Jaina asked the leader angrily. If it were orcs from other clans, this might be enough to scare them. Unfortunately, this is the most elite warsong clan in the tribe. Almost all of the cavalrymen's bodies trembled. Even Jaina was a little familiar with the name Warsong Clan. Yes. The Warsong Clan. The Warsong Clan had made a name for themselves since South Shore. They dared to fight flamethrowers head-on, destroyed the Silverpine Forest, and even fought their way to Rotterdam. The Warsong orcs dispersed, but it didn't take long for Jaina and the others to know what they were doing. All of a sudden, there was a loud sound of glass shattering above their heads. Then, there was a second sound, a third sound, dozens of times. Countless torches were thrown in, smashing the glass windows on both sides of the church, which were at least 2 people high above the ground, and landing on the ground inside the church. Because many parts of the church were already covered in frost, it did not cause a fire. It only caused chaos among the injured cavalrymen. When a few brave cavalrymen climbed to a high and narrow window to peek outside, a cavalryman almost had his head pierced by a spear. In the next moment, there was an earth-shattering sound from all directions of the church. Bang! 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 The dull sound of the collision was like the knell of the Grim Reaper. The paladin cursed, "Damn it! I knew they would use the tree trunk as a battering ram." That's right, the orcs used their great strength to break the trees in the town, uprooting them and using them as siege awls. Although the church was made of bluestone, it was not a fortress. In fact, unless it was a fortress made of cement, most traditional fortresses were useless. He could only become the victim of this group of people who believed in strength creates miracles. She had clearly crashed into the walls of the church, but the sound that sounded like a landslide made Jaina feel as if the trees had directly crashed into her chest, flattening her ribs. Her lungs, which had shrunk into her lungs, could no longer expand and breathe in fresh air. Fight to the death. The holy knight raised his war hammer high up in the air without any hesitation. Fight to the death. Even the wounded struggled to get up and raised their weapons high up. Jaina did not expect that she would be in a desperate situation in just a few minutes. Bang! Bang! Bam! The orcs outside were very professional. They stopped when they were about to smash a wall. They were waiting for more breakout points to be ready. The strict management of these orcs made it hard to believe that they were just a barbarian race from a distant planet. Finally, with a rough command, more than 10 holes were blasted on both sides of the church. Every hole perfectly avoided the pillars of the church. Almost at the same time, more than 10 slender trolls jumped onto the high windows of the church, holding sharp spears in their hands. 2 long fangs were wriggling in their wide-open mouths, and they had cruel smiles on their faces. Hee hee hee. Loktar. Amidst the flying debris and dust, the burly orcs charged in, brandishing their huge weapons and roaring in a hoarse voice. Jaina, who was wrapped in a white barrier, was the main target. She only had time to use Flame Blast to send an orc flying, and the next moment, more than 10 spears were thrown at her. Jaina still managed to use Flash in her panic. The place where she stood half a second ago was nailed with countless spears. Half a second later, she was not so lucky. The 5 spears that followed behind easily pierced through her magic barrier. Ah, Jaina finally let out a scream as if she was dying. She used her arms to protect herself in vain. Duque. I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. Jaina cursed before she died. At the very last moment, a miracle happened without any warning. Jaina's gloves suddenly burst out with a dazzling arcane light. Time seemed to freeze. Jaina opened her eyes, and her clear pupils were filled with shock. Roar, a fierce and majestic roar came from Jaina's gloves. The wooden spears that were thrown at her silently turned into sawdust, then into powder, and disappeared in the air. Along with this inhuman roar, everyone on the battlefield, be it the orcs who raised their war hammers and the human cavalrymen who had lost their arms and were about to use their remaining arm to stab their long swords, all froze in place. At this moment, everyone felt their strength and courage escaping from their bodies with fear in their hearts. They had a premonition that something was about to descend. It was a mysterious existence with unstoppable power. When it descended, it would dominate everything and take over the entire battlefield. In the blink of an eye, everyone knew who that it was. A huge illusory magic flag made of purplish-blue arcane energy rose from Jaina's gloves. The flag was so huge that it actually surpassed the entire church and rose outside the church. The orcs and cavalrymen subconsciously raised their heads to look at the flag. Then, be it in a very non-standard common language or a thick Lordaeran accent, the orcs and cavalrymen all said the same name, Duke Marcus. As if hearing the call of the hundreds of thousands of people, a blue light suddenly lit up beside Jaina. Before everyone could react, a young man in a blue and white mage robe stood beside Jaina, who was kneeling on the ground. With one hand holding Jaina's arm, Duque laughed and said, "Ah. You still activated the last insurance on the smoke glove after all." Chapter 676. Final insurance? Jaina's beautiful blue eyes widened. Although she wanted to pretend to be moved to tears and snot after being rescued, in the end, Duke Marcus. You're a complete bastard. If she could bite Duque to death, she would definitely be willing to tear off Duque's flesh bit by bit. The current Jaina was far from the scheming and shrewd strong woman of the future, and this little lady could not help but fly into a rage. Unfortunately, her threatening actions were destined to be suppressed by Duque. That's right, she really attacked Duque. A flame blast flew towards Duque's face. If Duque was an ordinary person, Jaina's attack would definitely make Duque's mother unable to recognize him. Unfortunately, Duque was a radiant moon mage. Such a low concentration of magical elements would naturally dissipate when it came into contact with the elements around Duque's body. Jaina had indeed calculated this. Unfortunately, what she did not expect was that Duque actually retaliated. That's right. The moment before Jaina's flame blast was released, Teacher Duque actually retaliated with a magic counter, without the demeanor of a senior. The so-called magic counter was to instantly mobilize the elemental power in the atmosphere to disrupt the balance and circulation of the opponent's magic circuit. If it happened to counter the opponent's magic while they were casting, it would cause the opponent's entire magic circuit to be in a state of chaos for at least 8 seconds. This was only for mages of the same rank. Duque, a radiant moon, bullying an earth mage was simply shameless to the extreme. The magic circuit in her body instantly became chaotic, and Jaina almost fainted on the spot. Cough, cough, cough. The poor expired lowly choked. It was impossible for her to recover without more than a minute, and this was under the premise that she was not continuously disturbed. On the other hand, Duque's appearance undoubtedly caused an earthquake. The Lordaeron cavalry cheered thunderously. The beastmen, on the other hand, were like insects avoiding a disaster, hurriedly fleeing from the town. Run! It's that devil Duque. Even the bravest warsong beastmen lost their will to fight in the face of this storm flag that represented terror and death. Duque's flag represented a terrifying legend that could not be broken by the orcs. Duque's flag was like a haze that shrouded the entire beastman race. With Duque's storm flag, the beastmen would never be able to win. Although none of the beastmen were willing to admit this, Duque had turned these conclusions into reality every time. This time was no exception. Suddenly, a cold current spread out in a circular shape with the church as the center. The cold wind blew past, and the stones on the ground seemed to tremble. They spun strangely, and even followed the tiny gravel into the air. It wasn't that there was a supernatural phenomenon of anti-gravity on the ground, but that the cold air that shot up into the sky was too vast and frightening. In less than 3 seconds, the entire town with a diameter of 500 meters was covered by the cold air. The beastmen who were trying to escape took large strides, but their lower bodies were frozen in a ridiculous position, because a wave of frost had quietly frozen their lower bodies. Ah ah ah. No, ancestor. Save me, all sorts of cries sounded in the beastman language. At this moment, the Lordaeron cavalry was shocked to find that the cold air had perfectly avoided every one of them. Regardless of whether they were in Duque's sight, or whether they were close to the beastmen, only the beastmen were hit, and the cavalry less than 20 centimeters away were unharmed. Jaina's expression of shock also froze on her face. What kind of control is this? Duque raised his right hand lightly, and snapped his fingers elegantly. Snap! It sounded like the opening of the gates of hell. At least 300 illusory palms made of arcane energy suddenly appeared in the air. Magician's hand! Jaina exclaimed, seeing Duque for the first time. Every cavalier of the Rotterdam kingdom held their breath at this moment. No, the beastmen were terrified, waiting in despair for the final judgment of death. Countless arcane missiles poured down like a torrential downpour. Every high-ranked arcane missile shot by a radiant moon great wizard had the destructive power of a ballista. Under Jaina's incredulous gaze, just as the cavalry opened their mouths in shock, the beastman army that could easily drown them was easily crushed. Jaina was very reluctant to use the word crushed to describe the shocking scene before her eyes. However, it was the most suitable word. The heavy hammer that could easily smash a cavalry's kite shield turned into metal scraps after coming into contact with an arcane missile. The burly beastmen that were 2.5 meters tall were easily blown into pieces like broken puppets. Broken fangs, bulging eyeballs, rainbow-colored brain matter, innards that couldn't be described, and broken bones that were scarlet with a hint of white. If the church was a slaughterhouse of the past, then what was presented in front of Jaina now was an uncensored live broadcast of a slaughter. Blarg. Jaina had thought that she couldn't vomit anymore, but she didn't expect that when her stomach was empty, she could still vomit yellow bile. After vomiting with much difficulty, Jaina's body trembled as she finally spat out, "Duque, you bastard. Don't even think of marrying me in this life. Duque smiled, as if his plan had succeeded. Very good. Very powerful. I like what you said. Jaina almost fainted from anger at Duque. There were no beast men left. No. There was one left. A beast man that was clearly more muscular than the others had 2 broken arms, and was kneeling in pain near the entrance of the church. The crippled beast man struggled to stand up. He glared with bloodshot eyes and roared. Unexpectedly, he spoke in the standard human language. Why? Why? Duke Marcus. Why didn't you kill me? Jaina and all the cavalrymen looked at Duque in shock. To be able to kill hundreds and thousands of beast men with such precision, and yet only break the arms of this beast man, it was obvious that Duque did it on purpose. Duque let go of Jaina's arm and walked to the entrance of the church with his hands behind his back. On the stairs, he raised his chin 45 degrees and looked down at the tall beast man. Tell Grom Hellscream. Get out of the Eastern Kingdom. As long as I, Duke Marcus, am here, there will be no place for beastmen. If you really piss me off, even if I have more important things to do, I will comb through the Tirisful glades and hang every beastman. Chapter 677. His sonorous and forceful voice reverberated in the sky that had become silent once more, and it was like a blade or a sword that was engraved into the hearts of everyone. Duque could tell that the beastman was a 1,000-man commander. If it was the Warsong tribe of the past that had hundreds of thousands of warriors, a 1,000-man commander would not even be in the list. Now that the tribe had been crushed and most of the remaining beastmen had fled back to the dark portal, losing 1,000 men was enough to make Grom's heart ache. It was not that Duque did not want to exterminate the Warsong beastmen. Unfortunately, the beastmen had found a way to deal with the Alliance, digging tunnels. Their main camp was in the future Hearth Valley, which was mostly mountainous. Then, the Warsong beastmen who had awakened a strange talent almost hollowed out the mountain. If he faced Grom Hellscream on flat ground or in a forest, the current Duque had at least a 70% chance of killing him. With the help of the Windrunner sisters, it was 90%. In a place like the tunnels, where only the brave would win, if he did not drag corpses to revive, Duque would not even have a 20% chance of winning. The only fortunate thing was that the beastmen were not a race that was good at self-sufficiency. Their large demand for meat meant that they had to frequently come out of the tunnels to forage for food. Whether it was hunting or attacking human villages. Duque did have the ability to exterminate the Warsong beastmen, but that would require him to mobilize at least 30,000 dwarves and 50,000 human soldiers. If he did nothing and surrounded Grom for a year and a half, the Warsong tribe would have to kneel no matter what. Unfortunately, the price was too high, and it was not in line with the interests of Stormwind City and Iron Furnace Castle. This was why Duque could let the Windrunner army continue to bleed the Warsong beastmen, but could not exterminate the Warsong tribe. Duque knew that if he let this beastman with 2 broken arms go back, there would be a smaller version of Kargath Blade Fist. Duque did not care. As long as he could exert enough psychological pressure on the future core figure of the tribe, that was enough. As expected, the beastman was on the verge of collapse. Ah, bastard. Duke Marcus. One day, the tribe will make you pay. The orc Chiliarch roared like a wounded beast. Ha 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 ha. Duque laughed maniacally. Your first great chieftain, Black Hand, is no good. Not the second great chieftain. Wait until you elect the third great chieftain to come and die. I will use your blood to tell you who the eternal nightmare of the tribe is. Ha 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 ha. Duque's laughter was very arrogant and presumptuous. To the orcs, it was the laughter of a devil standing at the peak of evil. In the ears of humans, there was an indescribable sense of pride. Unknowingly, every cavalryman of the Rotterdam kingdom straightened their backs. Even though they were injured and their broken arms were still hurting, their hearts were filled with heroism. That's right. Duke Marcus. Only such a heroic man could be called a hero of the Alliance. Only such a brave and wise man could annihilate the millions of orcs. As expected, Duque was the flag of the alliance. Unknowingly, the eyes of the Rotterdam Kingdom's cavalrymen were filled with tears. Jaina was a little dazed. She hated this feeling. She knew that it was that bastard Duque who pushed her to this barren north. She knew very well that this town that was attacked by the tribe must have been lured here by Duque. It could be said that she was forced into danger because of Duque's scheme. A terrifying commander who could toy with millions of orcs in the palm of his hand. It would be too fake to say that he did not even think of this. And this fellow, who did not look remorseful, did not seem to want to deny this. She should hate him for messing up her first Valentine's Day and her dream of a perfect 14th birthday. After thinking it through, she realized that Duque was telling her that this was the orc tribe that her father and the entire Kurtira's kingdom had been fighting for the past 2 years. This was the battlefield that her brother, Drake, had sacrificed his life for. And she. Perhaps this was in line with one of her dreams. Duque did not seem to treat her as a political tool, nor did he treat her as a woman. Instead, he nurtured her as an important mage in the alliance. Jaina did not know whether to laugh or cry. However, Duke was able to use Army Destroyer all by himself. Such a mighty figure caused Jaina's heart to flutter. Because at this moment, Duque and the legendary hero Duque had silently overlapped. More specific, more clear. The orc Chiliarch left in a very manly way. He pressed his bleeding arms against one of the hammers that Jaina had just burned red. The high temperature quickly scorched his wounds and stopped the bleeding. Obviously, this was something he had learned in the Silver Pine Forest that was like a fiery hell. The paladin captain who led the team came over and bowed to Duque respectfully. "Greetings, Your Excellency. I am the captain of the 3rd Garrison of Tirisfal, Baron Thorad Cashin." "Excuse me, are you Grand Duke Marcus?" "That's me." Thank you for your help. Without you, perhaps we would have all been wiped out." Then he glanced at Jaina, who was covered in blood. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but can I ask what's going on?" Because of a mistake in the teleportation spell, Princess Jaina Proudmoore accidentally came to Tirisfal Forest. It was you who bravely protected Princess Proudmoore under the siege of 1,000 orcs until Grand Duke Marcus arrived. Brave warriors, you not only fought against the evil orcs, but also protected the beautiful princess. You did a good job and deserve a reward. Duque took out a piece of craft paper and a quill, patted it on the wall, scribbled down the general process, and stamped his own seal. "Take this to your commander, or even to His Majesty Menethil. You will be rewarded. Lordairans and Tiras. And this is my small private reward." Duque took out a bag of gold coins for the paladin and a pair of paladin gloves made by the dwarves of Iron Stove Castle. Cashin and his men were immediately moved. Jaina. The little princess of Tiras was so angry that her teeth itched. It was Duque who had deliberately dug a pit for her to jump in, and even included the cavalry in the pit. They had worked for you, but you made it seem as if Jaina's spell mistake had caused them to suffer heavy losses. But as smart as she was, of course, she would not expose Duque on the spot. After politely thanking him, she teleported back to Karazhan with Duke, even quieter than a well-behaved wife. Chapter 678. After Duke and Jaina went out, in Karazhan, Jaina's maids and attendants were all discussing it in private. The soul of gossip that had existed since ancient times was burning. Do you think that the Grand Duke and Her Highness will do that? Definitely. No one can resist Her Highness's charm. Now that Her Highness is the only princess left in the world, any normal man would know what to do. I still don't think they will go straight to home plate. That's hard to say. Isn't the Lake of Wind in the East Elven Forest beautiful? What if the scenery is too beautiful? Yeah. Back then, I was mesmerized by the scenery of the sea, and then I lost my chastity to that bastard Anthony. Hey. I heard that His Majesty Proudmoore and Miss Golden Sword also had sex on the ship back then. Sylvanas, who was not far away, sneered when she heard this. She turned around and teased Alusia. Yo, little Alusia, aren't you afraid that Duque will act impulsively and let little Jaina come ashore first? Hee hee. Alusia shook her head firmly. Sister Sylvanas, you also know about Duque's plan. I'm just afraid that Duque will go too far and not know how to keep it. Queen Sylvanas smirked. That's not necessarily true. Our Duque is so popular. Besides, that playboy, didn't he hide a real princess before? Shoo. Alusia raised her index finger in front of her lips and nervously made a shushing gesture. Pfft, they are not elves who can hear the whispers of the wind. Queen Sylvanas shrugged indifferently. I really don't know what's so good about Duque. Eldest and third sister are like this, and so are you. Everyone is dead set on that kid. Alusia's pretty face turned red. He. Hey. Do you want to make a bet with me? Let's bet on whether Duque will do anything to little Jaina. Let's bet. Alusia agreed a little angrily. What's the bet? Sylvanas asked with a hint of mockery. Let's bet on him doing something within his power. All right. Just as the two of them made their vows, Alusia felt an arcane wave coming from the other side. All of Karazhan was in a state of strict spatial lockdown, especially from the direction of Azeroth. With Duque and Khadgar's efforts, most of the spatial rifts had been moved to the original location of the Knight's Nightmare. It was now guarded by the Einherjar, the Saintess of Chastity, and the giant arcane constructs led by the Curator. The stables, parlor, and ballroom at the main entrance had been refurbished. Even the opera house would be reopened soon. This arcane wave was a portal that could lead directly to the front door. Only Duque and Alusia had the authority to open it. Duque returned with Jaina. Gianna's appearance caused all of Kul Tiraz's maids and servants to cry out in alarm. Your Highness. What's wrong? Jaina's head maid rushed up in panic, and she glanced suspiciously at Duque. It's not my blood. I'm fine. Jaina, who had calmed down, quickly got to the point. I went through a cruel magic trial, and now I just want to take a good bath. Even though Jaina comforted the maids, her appearance was too horrifying. Her entire upper body was dyed red with blood, as if she had fallen into a pool of blood for an evil ritual and was then fished out. At this moment, even though no one said anything due to Duque's authority, every Kul Tiraz citizen felt a deep resentment towards Duque. What happened to the romance that was promised? What happened to the wonderful Valentine's Day? It's fine if you don't want to date our precious princess, but you even got yourself covered in blood. What the hell is this? Duque ignored the murderous gazes of the maids and shrugged. On the other side, Sylvanas, who came up to greet him, had a slightly pretentious expression of surprise. Is it that bad? Alusia and Khadgar nodded at the same time. Before Jaina could go far, one of the maids beside her had already vomited, because the maids had seen the pieces of internal organ stuck to the back of Jaina's shoulder. Alusia gave Duque a ladylike bow. Seems like it's more suitable for me to go. Although Alusia looked gentle and weak, she had fought thousands of miles with Duque in the past, and had seen even the most tragic of battlefields. She was 100 times better than the maids who had never seen blood. Alusia, this is my loss. Sylvanas was very straightforward. Alusia waved her hand as she left, indicating that she had heard him. In the hall, only Duque and Sylvanas were left. Yo, Duque, you really don't regret what you did? Regret what? His Majesty Dalan handed his daughter over to an archmage who killed the most orcs in the Alliance as a disciple. He should have been mentally prepared for this. Duque looked indifferent. You're really willing to be so cruel to such a delicate little girl? Queen Sylvie put her hands on her hips in surprise. Is this still the Duke Marcus who used to be obsessed with beautiful women, who gave magic roses everywhere and used magic to please girls? Duque blushed. Alright, stop teasing me. Times have changed. Maybe there will be 2 to 5 years of peace, but the symphony of destruction has already begun. First, Jaina does have the talent to be a hero. Second, the one who can stand by my side in the end must be a powerful woman who can protect herself in any crisis. Cervantes was not stupid. She immediately realized that she was in Duque's hunting range. Bastard. Do you want to kill all 4 of us Windrunner sisters? Do you want to die? I'll say this first, I don't like you. Don't flatter yourself. Duque touched his nose awkwardly. I didn't say that. Humph. That's good. Cervantes turned around, showing the back of Duke's head, and left without saying anything. On the other side, in the bathroom of Karazhan, Jaina could not count on the maid. She could only ask her best friend and spy Duque sent, Alicia, to wash her body. She washed her body with warm water over and over again, but no matter how she washed, she could still feel the disgusting smell of blood in her nostrils. Human, orc, the cavalryman whose neck was pierced by a spear, the warriors who died in front of her, the orcs who were smashed into pieces by Duque's magic, everything that happened today uncontrollably replayed in her mind. Jaina shrunk her body and put half her face in the water. She blew bubbles out of boredom. Poof 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 poof. The next moment, an illusion appeared in Jaina's vision. She was not soaking in clean water, but in a pool of blood. Wretch! Jaina hurriedly got up and vomited again. Chapter 679. Are you alright? Alicia patted Jaina's back lightly. Maybe I wasn't used to it at first. When I saw the battlefield for the first time, my reaction was similar to yours. I went back and threw up for 2 days. Damn it. Duque ruined my Valentine's Day and my birthday. Jaina looked like she wanted to eat Duque alive. I'll remember him for the rest of my life. Alicia could only shrug helplessly. She could not speak up for Duque. Of all the days, he had to pick a time like this. Wasn't this just torturing people? Alicia sighed. Yes, yes, yes. Little Jaina, it'd be best if you could beat him up with magic in the future. He's really despicable sometimes. Jaina was very smart. She could tell from a few words that Alicia was still on Duque's side. She had an indescribably strange feeling. Was this her best friend who was likely to snatch her man? Jaina decided to wait and see. Here, tell me more about Duque. Why, are you starting to give in to him? No, to conquer an enemy, one must first fully understand him. All right, so she had already become an enemy. Then. Duque, don't blame me for selling you out. Of course, I don't believe that Jaina at this level can handle you. At this moment, in the master bedroom on the highest floor of Karazhan, Duque had returned with Aurelia and Sasha. Sylvanas continued to command the Windrunners Rangers in place of them. Sasha rushed over like a bird returning to its nest and gave Duque a kiss. Duque, I'm so happy. When you made this Valentine's Day, I almost thought you were going to make a festival in Stormwind just for Jaina's arrival. Aurelia took off her white coat and laughed. If this is also Valentine's Day, then this must be a bloody Valentine's Day. Sasha tacitly stepped aside to let her elder sister and Duke hug each other. After a round of exchanging words and tongues, Duque brought the 2 sisters to the table that had already been prepared. The nobles basically didn't talk during the meal, and even if they did, they would do so in whispers. But at Duque's place, they didn't have to worry so much. They continued to chat as they ate. Speaking of which, do you really like Jaina's talent that much? Aurelia had always been curious. She didn't understand why Duque was willing to nurture Jaina with all his might, even though he clearly rejected Jaina personally. Duque cut off a small piece of steak and swallowed it. He wiped his mouth with a napkin and said, "First of all, her magic talent is top-notch. She's the same as Ronan, a Breaking Dawn great wizard." From Duque's mouth, this evaluation could not be said to be low. The Windrunner sisters froze. Then, given her identity as a princess, she'll be able to do a lot of things if there are any major changes in the Rotterdam Kingdom in the future. But she had a very special characteristic, and that was that she was too rational. She was used to weighing the value of everything on both ends of the scale. This could be a good thing or a bad thing. In a bad situation, she could be the next great traitor, Pyranod. After hearing this, Aurelia couldn't eat anymore. Then, it doesn't matter. That's why I gave her a strong dose of medicine. Regarding Jaina, Duque had actually thought for a long time. If it was according to the original history of Jaina, Duque would definitely kill her with a stick. Damn it, the so-called alliance with the tribe against the evil forces, this was equivalent to selling Dad, who didn't see the big picture and destroyed the cooperation between the tribe and the alliance, to Rexer and Thrall. When Dad died, he would come out and shed a few drops of tears. Looking at the original history, apart from that time when Mount Hyjal resisted the Arkharans, Jaina mostly flirted with the tribe when she shouldn't have. When she really had to ally with the tribe, Theramore, her life's work, was flattened by the great chief, Braindead Roar, with a nuclear-level magic bomb, focusing Rainbow, causing her to lose her mind. At the end of the day, it was because Jaina was too smart and too rational most of the time, forgetting that human society was ultimately maintained by human emotions. Duque's strong medicine was the brutality of the orcs. In the original timeline, Jaina was younger than she was now. Jaina, who hadn't experienced the war at the Dark Portal, had grown up in the Dalajan, the sealed holy land of magicians. She hadn't seen the brutality of the orcs, so when she first came out after growing up, she felt more sympathy for the orcs who were enslaved by humans. She felt that the orcs were the victims, and she couldn't understand the hatred and bigotry of her father, Dylin, towards the orcs. Now, Duque had taught her a very important lesson in advance. Talent could be cultivated, but heroes couldn't be replicated. Why? It was simple. All education could be repeated, but life experience couldn't be repeated. Even if it was the same trial, exploring an unknown dungeon for the first time and sending people to harvest after the exploration were two completely different levels of tests. Originally, Jaina had been too successful. She had been raised like a Virgin Mary in a greenhouse. Now that Duque told her, this world is cruel, and if you can't take it, go back and be a greenhouse princess, it would obviously change the course of Jaina's life. That night, when Duque fought with the Windrunner sisters, King Dylin of Kul Tiras received the news. Reading the magic message that was more than 1,000 words long, Dylin was stunned for a long time. His lover, Jaina Kingsword, placed her hands on his shoulders and massaged his shoulders. After Dylin's queen passed away, she was the actual queen. However, she had never tried to stand in front of the throne, nor did she try to make her and Dylin's illegitimate daughter officially join the royal family. She was satisfied with her current position, and she didn't want to cause any trouble for Dylin. Therefore, Dylin trusted her very much. Duque really dared to do it. Dylin was conflicted. He didn't know if he should be angry or laugh. He's been rejecting me since the beginning. His attitude hasn't changed at all, Jaina reminded Dalen. I thought he was never a real politician. If he was the kind of man who constantly compromised for political victory, he wouldn't have become the Alliance's hero. Isn't that right? Bastard, I want him to be my son-in-law. Jaina laughed. Now, he's just fulfilling his responsibility as a teacher. Even if you make a scene in the Alliance, no one will support you. Don't forget, you gave him your sword and asked him to fulfill his responsibility as a teacher. Dylin felt like he had shot himself in the foot. Bastard. I'll teach him a lesson one day. Chapter 680. The third year of the Dark Portal was a relatively peaceful year for the Alliance. Duque continued to teach Jaina viciously. No, he taught her with all his heart. He used a completely different teaching method from the Dalajan mages. In terms of personality building, Duque would bring Jaina to the Tirisful Forest to wipe out the orcs, or to the Swamp of Sorrows to clean up the orcs and various swamp creatures there. Under Duque's torment, the once beautiful princess would often leave the house clean in the morning and come back at night looking like a girl made of mud. Kul Tiraz's chief maids and female officers had sent letters of complaint to their countries at first, but they soon realized that even after they had been confirmed and presented to King Daelin, they were still like rocks in the ocean. They also realized that their king had tacitly agreed to all of this. In the field of magic, Duque's teaching method was more like a free-range one. After the system scan, Duque told Jaina that she could learn any type of book in any region. If she couldn't find a book, she could ask a ghost. Oh, ask Khadgar. The bored Khadgar would read magic books every day because he had nothing to do, so he was more proficient than Duque. Of course, Duque always had a way to show off his existence and value. Every time Jaina cultivated a new spell, Duque would always be able to see where Jaina's problem was at a glance, as well as the metamagic abilities on how to cultivate that spell. After a while, no matter how unconvinced Jaina was, she had to admit that this teacher, who was only 4 years older than her, was indeed qualified to teach her. It was now May of the 3rd year of the Dark Portal. It was the end of spring and the beginning of summer, and the cement road that traversed the entire elven forest from east to west was basically completed. With Duque providing the technology and the dwarves doing the work, the railway project that employed a large number of Stormwind workers had officially begun. At the same time, the equally grand reconstruction of Stormwind City was underway. Clayan had once doubted whether it was reliable for a country as weak as Storm Kingdom to carry out 2 projects that cost a lot of money and resources at the same time. In terms of money alone, it had cost more than 10 million gold coins. No one could calculate the amount of money needed for the various small projects. Duque replied, if someone else were to do it, it would be suicide. However, I'm a once-in-a-thousand-year internal affairs genius in Azeroth, so leave it to me. Duque's words were very arrogant, and the ministers were not convinced at first. It had to be said that it was too easy for a university student who knew a little about the market economy to transmigrate to this medieval world. Blindly giving out alms such as disaster relief food and clothing did prevent the worst situation of people starving to death in the beginning. But if he did it too often and for too long, it would produce another result. It was easy to raise lazy people. It wasn't that there weren't any holy people in the world. It was precisely because there were too many mediocre people that people yearned to be saints. On the other hand, if all the people in the world were to live like ascetics, 99% of them would not want it. Duque's approach was to use work as a form of relief. The first step was to make an announcement and directly tell the people that the country had just been destroyed and that the country had no money. In order to let everyone tide over the difficulties and not starve to death, the country had handed over all its savings. A lot of money and supplies were borrowed. It wasn't a simple announcement, but the mayor, village chief, and civil officials everywhere rushed to the people to publicize it almost every day. The second step was to implement the IOU system. The kingdom didn't have that many gold coins in circulation. Fine. IOU. Duque used 3 days to set up a complete IOU system. Those who took the country's disaster relief food in the winter would write an IOU based on the quantity and quality. Those who took cotton-padded clothes would also owe. Those who obtained a new house would owe even more. This was all owed to the kingdom. Then spring came, and it was time to start paying off the debt. When the farming was over, they would have to work for the country according to their own abilities. How much would it cost to build the railway in a day? How much would it cost to join the patrol team? After a while, the people discovered, hey, working for the country to pay off the debt, in the end, they could still get a few more IOU every day, which could be used to exchange for necessary food and daily necessities. The IOU that Duque made couldn't be counterfeited because it was a magic item made by the magic apprentices he recruited. The cost of making the IOU itself far exceeded the value of the IOU itself. As a result, a complete internal circular economic system controlled by the planned economy was formed. It started operating in March for 2 months. When Lang cautiously came to Duque to ask how much the country owed, Duque directly gave him a deficit of 0. Oh, no, it was a lot of surplus. Lang and the ministers of the interior were dumbfounded. Lang was already mentally prepared to sell the land and the state's assets so that the people could live a good life. Anyway, most of the nobles had been wiped out before, and their fiefs had fallen back into the hands of the Rin family. It was still possible to live by selling the land. Now, Duque actually told him that not only did he not suffer a loss, but he also made a huge profit. Lang didn't understand. The ministers of the interior didn't understand either. Duque shook his head as he explained. Let me tell you. IOU is actually gold coins. It's just that I took advantage of everyone's gratitude and secretly lowered their wages. Then I created a market environment where gold coins can't buy things, but IOU can. This caused everyone to unknowingly do a lot more work for the kingdom. Now, we don't need to spend money to feed the people, and we don't need to spend money to rebuild. But we still receive the gold coins from the countries of the alliance. That's the money for building the watchtower. However, a very important part of the initial investment was to build this railway across the elven forest. I used this to invigorate the market economy of Stormwind. In addition, because of the smooth transportation, the specialties of the various regions of Stormwind have also begun to be collected by the kingdom. The kingdom will sell them directly to the maritime merchants of Kull, Tiras and convert them into foreign exchange. So in the latest March and April, the kingdom has a monthly surplus of about 1.2 million gold coins. After Duque finished calculating the accounts, Lang and the ministers of the interior were all on their knees. Unfortunately, due to cultural differences, otherwise they would all write the word convinced to Duque. Duque smiled and looked into the southeast. His gaze seemed to pass through space and fell on the door of darkness thousands of miles away. Sorry, tribe. Our alliance has revived ahead of schedule. What about your tribe? The tribe on the other side of the door of darkness, very bad. At the end of last year, when Kilrog Deadeye's Blood Ring clan and Kargath Bladefist's Shatterhand clan returned to Draenor, they faced a world that was completely out of control. The tribe that had lost its chief once again returned to the chaotic state of the clans. Almost for the entire winter, the clans were fighting each other. Chapter 681. In the First and Second War of the Dark Portal, the Horde was arrogant and seemed to have an endless number of troops. It was largely because of the worsening natural environment of Draenor. The reason why Gul'dan was able to lure so many beastmen to their deaths was very simple, since they were all fighting and killing each other, rather than letting so many fierce beastman tribes fight each other for a smaller and smaller piece of cake. It was better for everyone to go to another planet and fight for a bigger piece of cake. However, with the defeat of the Horde and the fall of the strongest clans in Azeroth, the lack of resources in Draenor seemed to have become less scarce. The Blackrock clan, which was originally the #1 clan, claimed to have 500,000 warriors at their peak. Of course, this was an exaggeration, but there were definitely 300,000 adult orc warriors, and most of them were absolute elites who had experienced the war with the Draenei. Unfortunately, they were weakened by Duque's many tricks, and even the last seed was lost in the sea in the southeast of the Lordaeron continent. The only remaining clan was the Blacktooth clan, which was split from Blackhand's two sons, Rend Blackhand and Maim Blackhand. After chasing after Gul'dan, they directly left Orgrim's control. It could be said that the absence of the Blackrock clan had freed up the living space of at least 3 first-rate clans for the entire Horde. Then there was the Warsong clan, which was second only to the Blackrock clan. Unlike the original history, the Warsong clan was thrown into Azeroth early in this war. Now, after South Shore and Silverpine Forest suffered a series of heavy losses, the entire clan was trapped in the Tirisful Glades. Then there was the Frostwolf clan, which was also one of the first-rate clans. They were not much different from the original history, and were directly banished to the Alterac Mountains before the official start of the First War of the Dark Portal. Then there was the Storm Predators and the Blackscar clan, which were at the bottom of the first-rate clans. Finally, there was the Blood Ring clan, the Shattered Palm clan, and the Dragonmaw clan. These were the 3 first-rate clans that suffered heavy losses, but still returned to Draenor. Unfortunately, due to the significant decline in population and warriors, they had become second-rate clans. All in all, the first-rate clans had nearly 1 million people empty, and this did not include the losses of the second-rate and third-rate clans. If the orc laborers, who had always been ignored by the chiefs, were included. In the 2 wars of the Dark Portal, the Horde had lost more than 2 million people. If anyone checked carefully, they would find that more than 1/3 of the warriors had drowned in the sea. The alliance had to give Duque a thumbs up. In the tribe, population and warriors were synonymous with territory. Without population and warriors, there would be no territory. There were more vacancies than in history, which led to a new round of reshuffling of power. When Orgrim was still around, none of the clans that stayed in Draenor dared to make a move even though they knew that the chief was still alive. The Orgrim captured, and the clans, of the Wolf Clan, of Dragon Clan, and Wolf Clan. For example, the White Claw clan was exterminated because they sympathized with Duroden and the Frostwolf clan's misfortune. The Thor, Thunderblade, Mocking Skull, Crimson Walker and Chiboneater, who had stayed in Draenor for various reasons and had yet to be sent to Azeroth, gained the greatest advantage in this shuffle. Before winter, they had more than doubled their territory. If it wasn't for the cold of winter, and if they had a little foresight, they might have been able to make Kilrog Deadeye and Kargath Bladefist suffer a grievance. While Draenor was busy fighting, on the eastern kingdoms of Azeroth, the revival of the countries continued. Obviously, the revival of the southern continent was faster than that of the Lordaeron continent. In the north, whether it was the Silverpine forest that had been burned to the ground or the Warsong orcs in the Tirisful woodlands, Tyrrhenas could not do anything. He could only hope for the harvest of the fields near Stratholme this year. After all, it was away from the forest, and the orcs would not dare to come out and face the Knights of Lordaeron. Barnil, Fellstone, and Maris, these famous grain-producing areas were Lordaeron's last hope. He even hoped that if Deathwing became the king of Alterac, at least Alterac's 10,000 acres of fertile land in Hillsbrad could be temporarily given to Lordaeron. The nearby Dalagen and Stormguard were finally on the right track. But no one could compare to the prosperity of the south. Even if Tyrrhenas did not want to admit it, he had to admit that there was no other genius in the world like Duque, who could create an independent economic system out of thin air and revive the whole kingdom without spending a single gold coin. Hell, if Kalia was here, I would marry Kalia to Duque even if it was embarrassing. The only good thing is, Daelin didn't seem to benefit from it. Tyrrhenas had thought of imprisoning Kalia for life because she had embarrassed the Menethil royal family. But when there was a greater benefit, Tyrrhenas hoped that his dead daughter would crawl out of her grave so that he could sell her again. This was the despicable politics of the royal family. When everyone's attention was on Stormwind, one day in mid-May, Antonidas suddenly received a request for a meeting from Duque. It was not an urgent request, but one that went through diplomatic procedures. The former Dalagen mage, Lady Alucia Berev, personally submitted it to the Foreign Affairs Department of the Kirin Tor Parliament. Even though Antonidas was obsessed with magic experiments, he still received Duque the next day. "Oh, my dear Duque, I thought you had the blood of dwarves in your veins. Railways? Trains? Looks like you're better at dealing with dwarves than you are at being a mage. Alright, what brings you here?" Antonidas hugged Duque with a hint of dissatisfaction and a hint of mockery. "I'm so happy to see you in such good health, Master Antonidas." Duque said politely, then went straight to the point. "Actually, I came this time because I received some unconfirmed news. But this news is too important, so I had to come personally." "What kind of news?" Antonidas pondered. He knew Duque very well. Even though this young man's plans seemed wild and unconstrained, he had never failed before. From the war with the Horde to the victory ceremony of Lordaeron with the 4 Dragon Kings. Duque's actions always had an obvious purpose. If you ignored his actions, you would be tricked like Tyrrhenas, and don't blame him for not informing you in advance. The warlock King Ghoul, Dan's master, Nazul, has his eyes on the Dalagen Eye. Chapter 682. The Dalagen's Eye was a super arcane magic artifact, the treasure of the Dalagen. Suddenly hearing this name, even someone as mature and steady as Antonidas could not remain calm. It was no secret that the Dalagen possessed the Dalagen's Eye, but the news of an evil super warlock coveting the Dalagen's Eye made the Kirin Tor Council president feel as if he was sitting on pins and needles. "Duque. This news is not funny. Where did you get this news? What does the Horde want the Dalagen's Eye for?" Facing the serious Antonidas, Duque explained, I found the Book of Mediv in the library of Karazhan. Mediv. Antonidas whispered, feeling his stomach begin to twitch slightly. The Book of Mediv? The world's greatest wizard, the one who helped the orcs open the first dark portal, his magic book? That book contained the secrets of magic that all mages yearned for. Was it in Duque's hands now? Antonidas had an indescribable envy. Although he was only one step away from becoming a demigod as a Breaking Dawn wizard, if there were no accidents, this step would become a chasm that he would never be able to cross. If he had the Book of Mediv, he might have a chance. But he knew that Duque, as the successor of the Mediv, would not even lend him the book to read. On the other side, Duque found the Book of Divine Artifacts. It did not take him much effort to find it in the middle of the Mediv's study, on the day that Duque cleared the last hostile boss in Karazhan. As if a switch had been flipped, this Book of Divine Artifacts, that recorded most of the powerful magic of the Mediv, appeared on the bookshelf in front of Duque. It was a huge and thick book. Its red cover was lined with brass, and there was a coat of arms with a flying crow on it. Unfortunately, Duque could only read a very small portion of the pages. The rest of the pages were all sealed by powerful magic. The system indicated that it could only be opened after becoming a Breaking Dawn wizard. Now, what Duque showed Antonidas was an illusion of one of the pages. On the page, there was a drawing that looked exactly like the Door of Darkness in the Cursed Land. However, this door wasn't in the Cursed Land. Looking at the drawing of the surroundings, it seemed to be in an unknown world. This is, according to the demonic language that I deciphered, there are two dark doors. One is in Azeroth, and the other is in Draenor, where the orcs are. They correspond to each other. Although you and I once worked together to close the dark portal, we only closed the portal itself. When we first created the dark portal, we didn't fill in the gap in the spatial barrier of Azeroth. Antonidas stroked his long white beard as he digested Duque's words. Continue. Duque pointed at the illusory page in his hand. If anyone can obtain the perfect structure of the dark portal and the coordinates of Azeroth from the Book of Mediv. If there is a powerful force that can reactivate the dark portal, such as the Dalajan's Eye, if there is a controller. Antonidas continued. Then, the reopening of the dark portal is no longer just an illusion. Duque came to a conclusion on this matter. About that controller, do you have any clues? The Kirin Tor Chancellor frowned. Yes. The scepter that Gul'-Dan used, Sardra's scepter. According to the orc captives, Gul'-Dan led his clan to abandon their tribe and went to the tomb of Sardra's in the Endless Sea, hoping to obtain the power of the fallen titan from Sardra's corpse. Obviously, he failed. The orc captive said that Gul'-Dan was drowned by the demons that escaped from the tomb. The tomb of Sardra's. Just hearing about it gave him a headache. If it was during peaceful times, Antonidas would definitely not mind summoning a group of bored mages to explore. After all, they were Dalajan mages. If they didn't die in an explosion in the laboratory, they would die in all sorts of suicidal incidents. Only 1 out of 100 would have a good ending. What's the attitude of the Dragon Slumber Shrine? It seems like the dragons are temporarily unable to enter. However, Alexstrasza promised to send a small team to monitor the area and kill any demons that come out. Antonidas sighed. It seems like we don't have any good ideas in the short term. Yes. I'm also here to remind you to take good care of the Dalajan's Eye. In my opinion, as long as the 3 artifacts do not fall into the hands of Zul, the Alliance will not be in greater danger. At least we won't have to face the 3rd war of the Dark Portal for the time being. Well, thank you for your notice. I will immediately convene a meeting of the Kirin Tor Council to discuss this matter and strengthen the level of protection for the Dalajan's Eye. Duque followed up with a few words and left. Through the portal, Duque returned to Karazhan and saw Aurelia, who had returned to rest. Without saying anything, Duque directly embraced this noble and wild female elf into his arms. Duque, what's wrong today? The female elf sensed that the atmosphere was not right. After a few seconds of silence, Duque suddenly said, "Aurelia, do you believe in fate?" Aurelia's brilliant golden hair seemed to be shining, and her sexy red lips curved into a smile from the bottom of her heart. "I do. If there was no guidance from fate, how could I possibly fall hopelessly in love with a human child like you?" "Then, do you believe that fate can be changed?" Leaning her head on Duque's shoulder, Aurelia enjoyed this quiet embrace, gently using her chest to feel Duque's powerful heartbeat. 2 years ago, when Stormwind City fell, didn't many people also believe that in the face of a powerful tribe, destruction was the only fate of humans? Then, who led them to launch a counterattack and finally to victory? Duque smiled. Yes. There was nothing to be afraid of. According to the original history, Aurelia would have joined the Alliance expeditionary force to counterattack Draenor, and then completely disappeared in that terrible big explosion, and was regarded as dead by the Alliance. But so what? I have already changed the fate of too many people. Lang, Lillis, Lothar, these important figures who had sacrificed themselves heroically in history were still alive and kicking at this moment. Lang was teaching the little Prince Varian. Lillis was still happily traveling the world. Anduin had just won the arm wrestling competition in the army. Oh. The only one who died before the notification seemed to be Nesario. What else do I have to be afraid of? Chapter 683. The reason why conspiracies were terrifying was that they were hidden under all appearances. The cheating behavior of a transmigrator knowing the plot was, in fact, an unreasonable act of penetrating the fog and reaching the essence. Now, the only thing that Duque could not be sure of was another thing. Why did the robbery team sent by Zul succeed so easily and snatch the 3 artifacts? One of the most important reasons was that the Wings of Death, Nesario, had intervened. With the help of the former dragon aspects, the Eye of the Dalajan, which was stored in the most tightly guarded treasure vault of the Dalajan, was no different from an exhibit in a glass window. The problem was, Nesario had already been killed by Duque. If the theft of the 3 artifacts had failed, the door of darkness would not have been completely opened again, and there would have been no expeditionary army, and there would have been no Draenor explosion. Oh. This is awesome. Just thinking about it makes me feel good. I don't have to work so hard anymore. Duque hugged Aurelia tightly. It was a feeling of wanting to rub his lover into his body and become one with him. Smelling the fragrance floating between the golden hair, Duque swore to himself, "Come on, Zul. I don't care if you're the first orc shaman or the powerful Lich King. I've already dug a big hole for you. Let's see when you jump into the hole." Strategies were especially effective when one's strength was insufficient and one had to fight the strong with the weak. When one's strength was strong enough to defeat the enemy, then it would be meaningless for the enemy to play any tricks. In the 3 years of the Door of Darkness, the whole year was spent in the midst of the kingdom's reconstruction. In May, Stormwind announced the implementation of compulsory military service. Every adult man over the age of 16 must undergo 3 months of military training. In addition, women who mastered the skill of the javelin would receive additional rewards. In June, the steam crane jointly improved by Duque and the dwarves was introduced to the reconstruction site of Stormwind City. The reconstruction work was greatly accelerated. At the same time, the Alliance built the watchtower in the Cursed Land. In July, the Stormwind engineering team, under the cover of Duke Marcus' private corps, paved a cement road to the Redridge Mountain in one go, reaching the entrance to the Swamp of Sorrows. In the same month, a large number of Murlocs and Nagas entered the swamp and fought fiercely with the swamp creatures and the orcs wandering in the swamp area. The supply route to the Alliance's barracks in the Cursed Land became smoother. In August, because the first batch of summer grain in the western wilderness had a good harvest, a large amount of grain was transported to various parts of the elven forest through cement roads, quelling a possible food shortage. At the end of September, the elven forest had a bountiful harvest, and the whole country rejoiced. In October, the construction of the cement road that connected the entire Swamp of Sorrows from the north to the south was completed, and many sentry towers were built along the road. In November, before winter completely set in, the double-track railway that traversed the entire elven forest was completed. This meant that the triangular junction area from Stormwind City to the Reed Ridge Mountains could now be reached in 2 days. Trains that used early steam engines could now pull 4 carriages at a time, transporting nearly 1,000 soldiers to the Red Ridge Mountain quickly. It was said that a newer type of steam engine was already being developed. In December, the Southern Continent Defense Command was established in the Reed Ridge Mountains, with Anjou and Lothar as the commander-in-chief, and Turalian as the commander of the Overwatch stronghold in the Cursed Land. While the alliance was vigorously rebuilding and preparing for the upcoming war, what were the Horde doing? Sorry. The Horde was still fighting. A spiked battle axe modified from a giant beast's lower jaw was brandished by its owner, its speed and power so astonishing that when it struck its target, it already released a sharp whistling sound in the air. Under the winter sun, dozens of pillars of blood spurted out from the neck of the orc powerhouse that was struck, emitting a fierce radiance. The owner of the axe laughed maniacally, opening his lower jaw that was covered in green tattoos to an almost impossible width. As he moved, his long black hair fluttered behind his head, and his blind left eye emitted an indescribable red evil light. His remaining eye kept turning, following his axe as it chopped at the enemies that dared to stand in his way. Weak. Too weak. Too weak. Scum like you can't even win against humans, and yet you dare to come to my Bloodring tribe's territory to die. Kilrog Deadeye roared. He continued to swing his axe, beheading his fellow orcs from different tribes as if he was cutting meat. Victory was undeniable. However, Kilrog felt a sense of emptiness. The enemy in front of him was too weak. Compared to the human holy knights he had fought before, it was like the difference between a wild boar and a giant dragon. His exquisite skills and great strength were rendered useless. Kilrog. Kilrog heard someone call his name, and snorted. He turned around, forcing himself not to be immersed in the desire for a bloody battle. Kargath. It was Kargath Bladefist. Barging in while 2 tribes were engaged in a fierce battle was not a rational thing to do. If he was not careful, he would provoke both sides to attack him. He did not care. Because he was Kargath Bladefist. Strolling on the battlefield, Kargath was practically taking a leisurely stroll. If any blind orc pounced at him, he would use his severed arm's serrated evil blade to send that guy to reincarnation. The battle was actually coming to an end. This small tribe that had gone mad from hunger had foolishly barged into the territory of the Bloodring tribe, which seemed to have fewer people. From the start, they were destined to have a tragic ending. They did not chase after this small tribe, as Kilrog's subordinates would do it themselves. Kilrog carried his serrated battle axe as he walked towards Kargath. Even though he had just been engaged in intense activity, he was now only lightly panting. He raised his head to look at Kargath. No matter how many times he had seen Kargath, the evil blade on his severed arm would always leave a deep impression on him. Old friend. Kilrog waited for the leader of the Shattered Palm tribe to walk to his side. They held each other's hands tightly. Of course, it was the right hand. Kilrog did not want to hold his opponent's blade. Looks like your tribe hasn't recovered yet. You should learn from my tribe. Kargath revealed a rough and cruel smile. Kilrog rolled his only remaining eye. You bastard, do you think anyone can learn from your Shattered Palm tribe? Directly cutting off an arm and equipping it with a blade is equivalent to joining the tribe. Thanks to this cruel yet simple and effective action, the Shattered Palm tribe's population rapidly expanded. The Bloodring tribe will rise again. However, have you had enough of this boring internal strife? Yes. If it wasn't for Ghoul Dan, we would have won long ago. Chapter 684. These 2 powerful chiefs were convinced that all of this was Ghoul Dan's fault. On the main road of Draenor, the plains that were originally covered with trees and vegetation had become lifeless. The trees that were once full of vitality had all withered, and the sky that was originally blue had now become as red as blood. All of this was because of those warlocks, and their endless thirst for power. Not only that, they had destroyed Draenor, but Dan was the mastermind behind all of this. It was also because of his fault that the tribe was unable to defeat the alliance and conquer that world called Azeroth. This was all because of that cunning warlock and his people had betrayed the tribe at a crucial time, and went to that damned demon King Sardra's mausoleum to seek power, causing the front lines to collapse. What should we do? You're already the wisest chief I know. You're not as good as me in battle, but I'm not as good as you in intelligence. Kargath didn't hide his weakness at all. I'm not as good as you in battle. The place where Kilrog's dead eye was emitted a dim red light, but this light disappeared in a flash. He didn't need to argue with Kargath. He was very clear about how ruthless Kargath, the madman who had broken his own arm when he was imprisoned by the ogres, and who had killed his way out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, was. Once he provoked this battle maniac's desire to fight, then the outcome wouldn't be decided in a day or half a day. First, we need to form a new core of the tribe. Core. Yes. A powerful clan alliance that all the clans have no choice but to acknowledge, just like the Blackrock clan in the past. Without a powerful core as a flag, that group of people with brains full of muscles who only see the increasingly smaller hunting grounds in front of them won't listen to anyone. Kargath muttered to himself for a moment, the Blackrock clan is destroyed, but if only the Warsong clan was here. Yes. It's a pity that Hellscream is trapped in Azeroth. This was a chain reaction. If only one Blackrock clan was kneeling in Azeroth, then there would naturally be a second and third clan that followed closely behind. However, it was precisely because he was clear about the structure and relationships of the tribe that Duque acted very decisively. Getting rid of Blackstone, trapping Warsong, crippling Blood Ring, Dragon's Maw, and Shattering Palm, in addition to Frost Wolf, who had already been exiled to begin with. This was no different from wiping out the top 5 clans of the Horde. Right now, the tribe was without a leader. Duque did not know that he had pushed the tribe too hard in the Second War, which directly led to the delay of Zul's emergence. What's more, he didn't know was that at some point in the future, an intense argument had already broken out about his existence. In an illusory, incorporeal spiritual space, several voices were arguing loudly. Duke Marcus is definitely a desecration and destruction of the timeline. Let's be clear. We bronze dragons are the protectors of Azeroth first, and then the protectors of time. Are you sure this Duque is on the Guardian's side? One of the possibilities we have deduced is that he will become the Lich King. That's only one out of 1,024 possibilities. Why don't you say that there's an 82% chance that it will become better? There's a 17% chance that it will remain the same? No, tampering is tampering. We must give him a warning. Caro, stop right there. The Bronze Dragon King Nozdormu at that point in time has clearly rejected all interference from us. Even if you return, it will be meaningless. Your power will be weakened to the point where you're weaker than a mortal. All right. I'll compromise this time. Next time, I'll do it myself. Speaking of which, it was inevitable that Duque would incur the wrath of the bronze dragons of the future timeline. Because this guy had already begun to play with the changing of the era. If the previous Azeroth was said to have a typical medieval worldview and magic, then now Duque was single-handedly pushing Stormwind City and Iron Furnace Castle from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance. In fact, Duque really wanted to push Azeroth to the Industrial Revolution in a short period of time. Unfortunately, the 3 dwarven races that represented the highest technology in Azeroth, dwarves, gnomes, and goblins, had all chosen the wrong technological talents. It was not an easy task to retract all of their unreliable ideas of seeking death. At first, Duque wanted to promote the use of rifles in the human army. Unfortunately, the level of firearms in this world was currently at the level of those that used solid bullets. Not only was the barrel thick, it could not fire continuously at all, and it could easily explode. When the enemy was charging, arrows could generally be shot 3 times, but this time was only enough for 1 shot from the gun. Even something like a 3-shot shot was not enough to make up for this substantial firepower deficiency. So, Duque had to continue playing with shields and spears in the front row and spear throwers in the middle row. The only big change was that Duque had introduced the dwarven mortars. The mortars of this era were not standard mortars. They were more like support short-barreled cannons, but Duque had improved the cannonball and the gunpowder of the cannonball. The original solid cannonball was replaced with hollow iron balls filled with iron pellets to increase the destructive power of scattering. The gunpowder was changed from adding gunpowder powder each time to storing the gunpowder in a gunpowder bag wrapped in oiled paper. When ignited, the gunpowder would still ignite, but the time needed to add the gunpowder was shortened, and the rate of fire increased. Duque began to train the mortars. After all, this could increase the firepower of the soldiers in short-range firepower support. Standing at the shooting range of the Overwatch fort, watching Duque's mortar team fire shells at a rate of 2 per minute. Each shell could accurately blast more than 10 armored scarecrows into pieces. The high-ranking officials of the Alliance were speechless. It feels like we spend 10 years to train a knight, and he's gone in a minute on the battlefield. It's not as good as training a group of mortars for 3 months. Andoin had his hands on his waist helplessly. Duque shrugged. It's not like you haven't experienced the Battle of Blackrock Mountain. If it weren't for the dwarven steam tanks, would we still be standing here talking so leisurely? Yes, yes. Technology is the #1 productive force. The gnome great craftsman Jurban recited Duque's famous saying. Andoin looked at the huge steel vehicle that came from the north, passed through the drawbridge, and drove into the Overwatch fort along the huge tracks on the drawbridge. He sighed deeply. I didn't believe in technology in the past. Even though I've been to the Iron Stove fort, I still can't imagine that it only takes a day to cross the entire elven forest. It only takes 3 days to get from Stormwind City to the Overwatch fort. Anduin Lothar, who had stayed in the unbuilt Overwatch fort for a period of time, knew very well what a miracle it was. Chapter 685. Dark Portal Year 4, October 16th. This was a big day worthy of the entire Alliance's commemoration, because on this day, it announced the completion of the reconstruction of Stormwind City, the construction of the Overwatch stronghold that was responsible for monitoring the Dark Portal, and the opening of the entire railway that spanned more than 2,000 kilometers, spanning across 4 major regions and connecting Stormwind City and the Overwatch stronghold. Using 2 years to create so many things, not to mention the amount of manpower and resources used, just this short period of time was enough to shock the entire Alliance. Impossible. Tyreenas almost fell off his throne. No way. I've only just finished rebuilding the inner city. Salas, whose home had also been demolished, looked at his Riptide castle, which was now a size smaller, and smiled bitterly. What was even funnier was that after Gilnes broke away from the Alliance, King Xian Greymane acted as if he was possessed. He was worried that the alliance of almost 10 kingdoms would interfere with Gilnes' internal affairs. Since last year, they had given up on the southern part of Silverpine Forest and started building the Greymane Wall along the terrain. Xian's method was similar to Thoradin the Great's construction of the Thoradin Wall to ensure the safety of the Arthi Highlands. However, it was infuriating to compare oneself to another. Gilnes had only just finished building a wall, but it was already announced that both cities had been completed at the same time. Old Jean's face was slapped so hard that it was bright red. That's impossible. How did Duque do it? Xian cursed from his throne. I heard that he boldly used goblins to help him, and even pulled over a lot of giant arcane puppets. Gnomes? Arcane puppet? Duque must be crazy. You can't blame Jean for saying that. Almost all of the intelligent races on the continent didn't have a good impression of the gnomes. They only knew how to destroy things without building anything. No matter where they went, they would create a foul atmosphere. However, it also depended on how it was used. No matter how unreliable the gnomes were, there were a few things that allowed the gnomes to be at the forefront of the world. The first was the goblin lumberjack. These gigantic robots were as tall as 2 people. Even though their terrible fuel engines produced ear-piercing noises all day long, and they constantly produced pungent smoke, the efficiency of the goblin lumberjacks was far above all other races. Even the thick-shouldered orc laborers couldn't compare to these robots that had sawtooth circular chainsaws installed on their arms. The second was goblin gunpowder. Don't think that the goblins were a bunch of fellows who were adept at using gunpowder and shouting, "Explosions are art." Another way to use the goblins was to use them to blow up mountains. The ground of the elven forest was mostly flat. After laying gravel and wooden ties, the rails would be very stable. Starting from the Red Ridge Mountain, it was no longer possible. The rugged Red Ridge Mountains originally only had a narrow, winding path. To get the trains through, it must be widened. When Duque chanted the mysterious spell that had always been effective against the gnomes, "Coin. I'll give you a lot of gold coins." Afterwards, countless goblins' eyes turned red as they howled and charged up the mountain with explosives. The continuous explosions could even be heard dozens of kilometers away in the East Cove lumberjacks. The crazy goblins blew up rocks and themselves into the sky. Within 3 months, they blew up the canyon near the triangular intersection into a basin and turned the natural moat into a passageway. According to the original agreement, after the completion of the project, Duque would pay more than 15 million gold coins for the cost of blowing up the mountain. Every big boss in the alliance was shocked to hear this amount of money. However, one night, half a month before the project was completed, an accident happened. For some reason, a rumor was leaked that the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza had helped to eliminate a big demon in the blasted lands. As a reward for the Red Dragon army agreeing to leave a small team of red dragons in the blasted lands, Duque prepared a sum of up to 1 million gold coins for the queen. That night, a few groups of goblins risked their lives to sneak into the queen's temporary cave in an attempt to steal the gold coins. In the end, the queen was furious and went on a rampage. She killed nearly 1,000 goblins at the campsite and burned them all. F***ck. In the spirit of a fair and just contract, I invited you to work for me. But you came to steal the money of the Alliance's most important ally? I'm hiring workers, not thieves and swindlers. Duque waved his hand and told the goblins to scram. At first, the goblins wanted to argue and ask if they could get half of their wages, but Alexstrasza, who was beside them, shouted, "Scram. If you talk any more nonsense, I'll burn down your hidden treasure bay." If one had to ask what was the difference between a goblin boss and a normal goblin boss, it would be that the goblins had some brains. They knew that the goblins couldn't afford to offend the Red Dragon. If they had to blame someone, they could only blame themselves for not controlling their brainless subordinates to steal the Red Dragon Queen's treasure. The queen unleashed a wave of dragon might, and the goblins ran away in fear. Then, they didn't even have to pay the 15 million gold coins. A few big bosses in the alliance turned around and wondered if Duque had purposely blackmailed the goblins. That's right. He did it on purpose. The goblins were a race that only cared about money. As for moral integrity, they would sell it for money. They could work for the beast men, the dragons, or the fire elementals. Whoever offered the highest price, they could sell off their previous employer in the next second. Last year, Dallin had taken the fleet of Stormwind and the fleets of the two countries to Hidden Treasure Bay to cause trouble for the goblins. The goblins had to cede territory and pay reparations. They had to hand over almost all of their warships. This year, they finally had a big deal. The goblins had used up almost all of their gunpowder stocks. Who knew that apart from the 1 million gold coins down, they wouldn't receive anything more? The goblins were furious and aggrieved. Although they had doubled the price of the cheap gunpowder and added a zero at the end, they still felt that Duque had cheated them. This time, they had been cheated by Duque. Yes, Duque had indeed cheated them. So what? Duque would never let these bastards join the alliance. Moreover, in the original history, the goblins were on the Horde's side. After using them, he would kick them away. Moreover, the entire alliance was cheering. The last key to quickly building Stormwind City and the Watchtower was the arcane puppets. These humanoid puppets, which were over 5 meters tall, were not rare. They could be seen everywhere on the streets of Silvermoon City. The puppets only needed a mage apprentice to control and were quite useful. They worked without complaint and could easily lift 10-ton boulders. Arcane puppets were the ones who built the core of the sturdiest outer wall of the watchtower. They carried the cut boulders and stacked them up one by one. A single puppet could do the work of hundreds of people for a day. Chapter 686. Unfortunately, there was a serious problem with the arcane puppet. It consumed a lot of mana. A magical jade could only allow it to work for an hour. According to the Daligen's calculations, this meant that the cost of using an arcane puppet for an hour was more than 100 gold coins. In the eyes of the allies, how was this building a city? It was like piling up gold coins on the ground and melting them. If it wasn't for Duque's confidence when the door of darkness closed, and the possibility that it would reopen within 2 years, the big shots of the alliance wouldn't even be willing to fork out so few people, not to mention the 5 million gold coins that they volunteered after seeing the scale of the project. However, seeing that Duque was the only one paying, no one dared to ask where the 5 million went and what it was used for. Anyway, all the ministers swore that if it were them, considering the harsh geological conditions and the serious supply and manpower problems, the 5 million would only be enough to build the walls of the watchtower. Barbicans, turrets, arrow towers, and the outer bastions were all out of the question, not to mention building a train station inside. Who could be like Duque, rebuilding 2 cities in one go and building a complete high-speed supply line? King Lang stood beside Duque. Now that the watchtower is built, you can breathe a sigh of relief, right? Duque nodded. You can say that. Andoin was more concerned about another problem. What if the tribe doesn't come in 2 years? I'm 90% sure that they will come. If they really don't come, I'll just let the Marcus family guard this place for generations. Duque pursed his lips. He didn't believe that the Burning Legion could wait that long. You're really willing, you're only 19 years old this year. For Azeroth. As Duque spoke calmly, the moral integrity he inherited from Alonso's fail began to echo with Duque's will, causing his body to emit a faint holy golden light. That was the will of a saint, and also the will of a hero. It was as if the young Duque's soul had sublimated because of this sentence. For a moment, everyone around was filled with respect for Duque's words. Yes. For Azeroth. Lang and Andoin stretched out their right hands in unison with their palms facing down and the back of their hands facing the sky. They stacked their hands together and looked at the crowd at the same time. For Azeroth. The bronze-bearded dwarf King Magni was relatively short, and he directly grabbed the hands of the great dwarf craftsman Jurban and his kinsman Kudrin. For Azeroth. Daelin and Salas smiled and put their hands on it. We are all doing this for Azeroth. Antonidas and Terinas placed their oldest palms on the highest point. The war was over, but a new war was bound to come. Perhaps every country had their own interests and concerns, but in the face of a huge threat that could destroy all of them, they had no choice but to ignore their differences and stand closely together. Duque also put his hand on it. Yes, let's work hard together. At this moment, in the moon's shadow valley of Draenor, 2 figures that were short and slender compared to the orcs walked into the village of the Shadow Moon clan as if there was no one else around. Na, Zol. A strange shout with a certain evil aura echoed in the village. Tyron Gorefiend and Jazz Soul Shredder, who was also a first-generation Death Knight, walked on the central road of the village. Their iron leg guards, which were rarely used by orcs, kicked up a thick layer of dust under their feet. The curious orc villagers poked their heads out of the simple doors and windows of their houses to see what was going on. When they met the strange red eyes of the intruders, everyone felt a chill that seeped into their souls, and everyone was scared back. Na, Zol. Tyrone once again roared in a cold and discontented tone, I want to talk to you. Don't make me force you out. His shout finally had a reaction here. A few tall and burly green giants carrying heavy iron axes came behind the 2 of them. A rough voice came from behind. I don't know who you are, and I don't care who you are. You are now trespassing on the territory of the Shadow Moon clan. Get out of here now, or die. The Death Knight turned to the strong orc warrior who had just approached him from behind. I, Tyren Gorfiend, am looking for Zul. Pass a message to him for me, or get out of here. The orc looked a little uneasy when he heard the name. Gorfiend? You are the Death Knight. His face twisted with disgust, revealing 2 fangs. He looked at the Gorfiend and his companions, summoned up his courage, and said, Don't provoke the Shadow Moon clan, or we will let you Death Knights die again. Jazz laughed. Then we really want to see how you will let us die again. Tyren nodded slightly. Suddenly, several figures walked out from the shadows of the huts in the village and came to the side of the 2 Death Knights. Although they were wearing hoods, their eyes, which shone with a strange light, were still clearly visible. Tyrone smiled, while the beast man gulped. Last chance. Hurry up and find Zul, or your pride will let you die a miserable death. The orcs always had a kind of persistence towards their own land that was unexpected to others. Zul won't see anyone. Although he had begun to sweat, it was clear that he was clenching the axe in his hand. Oh. Tyren sighed softly. His lungs that had long since decayed inhaled a mouthful of air and exhaled, issuing a strange whistling sound. You can die now. Without waiting for the orc to reply, Tyren stretched out his right hand, which was protected by plate armor, and chanted a spell in a low voice. The sudden pain made the orc forget to breathe, and he bent over in pain. Tyren clenched his fist. At the same time, dark red blood suddenly gushed out of the orc's nose, eyes, and mouth. Without staying for a second, Tyren turned and headed deeper into the village. He no longer had any interest in torturing this annoying orc. Along the way, it seemed that he had killed too many of these brainless guys. Evil dark magic. A Shadow Moon warrior shouted, grabbing the battle axe beside him. Kill them. Otherwise, no one will be spared. His roar was echoed by several orcs around him, and they all raised their weapons and rushed over. Tyren Gorfiend turned around like lightning, his glowing eyes narrowing. Since you want to die, I'll just kill you all and find Zul myself. Chapter 687. This time, he spread his hands forward at the same time, and the surging power of darkness condensed at his fingertips. A second later, as if a powerful mage had thrown a big fireball, the power of darkness exploded in front of the orcs like black flames, easily sending the orcs who had just rushed over waving their battle axes flying. They lay on the ground, howling in pain. Stop. Enough orc blood has been shed. An old orc's voice came through the air, echoing in the ears of all the orcs and Death Knights. The majestic voice itself had a mysterious power that made people unconsciously obey it. Tai Long put his arms down, and the Death Knights retreated in unison, forming a line behind Tai Long. Every pair of scarlet eyes stared at the leader of the Shadow Moon clan who appeared in front of them. Zul, you've finally come, Tai Long Gorfiend said lazily, standing in a pool of blood. In the next moment, he felt the old orc warlock's anger. The Shadow Moon clan has too many settlements, and it's too troublesome to find them one by one. I had to do this in order to get your attention. He turned to Zul and was surprised to find that Zul's face seemed to be smeared with a layer of white powder. It was deathly white, and his whole face looked like a skull. He looked at Zul, and Zul looked back at him. When their eyes met, Zul's eyes widened in surprise. I dreamed of you, he muttered. In the dream, I foresaw death. And now, you've come. Zul's thin and slender fingertips touched the hand-painted skull on his face, and a few white pieces peeled off. His voice seemed to have a sense of helplessness, as if he had to bow to fate. For 2 years, I've had the same dream. In the end, you still came to take my soul. Soul? I'm not interested in your soul, and of course, I'm not a saint who came to redeem you. You're right. I did come for you, but not for the reason you think. I came to ask you to stand up and lead the entire clan. Zul looked very confused. Me? Why me? In order to bring the tribe one step closer to the abyss of destruction? Haven't I committed enough sins? Zul's eyes were filled with unease and fear. I'm not a good tribe leader. Once upon a time, I believed in a false illusion, causing the entire tribe to fall into the flames of war, causing our world to be almost destroyed. I don't deserve to be the leader of the tribe. Please find someone else. Tai Long frowned. He had never thought that the ambitious Gul'dan's spiritual teacher would be so weak. If it was anyone else, he would have killed them. He tried to persuade Zul again. The tribe needs you, the tribe has been destroyed. Zul interrupted him, half of the orcs are trapped in that evil world. Most of them have left us forever. You want me to use my own strength to cross the void and become the leader of a group of dead people? Even if I can, what can I do? The light in Zul's eyes seemed to have returned to 2 years ago, back to the horrible scene described by the defeated orcs. 200,000 orcs died in the battle, and that was not a power the orcs could resist at all. Zul's body trembled like a sieve. The alliance is too strong. They have artillery and they have dragons. Our tribe will never win this war. The orcs' fate is already sealed. They will either be destroyed by the alliance in that world, or wait for death in this world that is gradually being destroyed. Yes. We can only choose how we die now. Tyran was almost driven mad by Zul. He never thought that the once respected tribal chief would become so afraid of death. Saying that Zul was weak was already praising him. This guy was a complete coward. What was even more unfortunate was that Zul was an absolutely necessary part of Tai Long's plan. Tai Long could no longer bear it. He grabbed Zul's arms and shook them angrily. It's been 2 years. Ever since the collapse of the dark portal, you've been hiding like a turtle for 2 years. In this world, the clans have done nothing but kill each other for the smaller and smaller hunting grounds. Are you really willing to wait for death in despair like them? So what? Zul roared in despair. Zul was finally a little angry, but Tai Long was happy. He had found a breakthrough. Yes, the current Zul was definitely a person who had abandoned his own people, lost his sense of honor, and had no sense of responsibility. But Tai Long found that he was afraid of death. If there was a weakness, it could be used. Wasn't that right? Tai Long's calmness infected Zul. Although the dark portal was destroyed, I have absolute confidence that I can rebuild it. I will leave a spatial crack in Azeroth until the entire tribe can pass through it. Then I heard from Gul'dan that there are some artifacts. If we can get some of them, we don't need to defeat the Alliance, because our goal is not to conquer the whole of Azeroth. Zul stopped struggling. His face was full of confusion. If we don't conquer Azeroth, then why did we repair it? As long as we get those artifacts, then we can change the spatial coordinates of the dark portal and use it to leave Azeroth and Draenor. We can live in other worlds. Well, other better worlds. Tai Long's voice became full of temptation, like an uncle who was using a lollipop to lure a child. Zul listened with rapt attention, and a glimmer of hope appeared on his pale face. Yes. Zul was a guy who was afraid of death. He knew very well that entering his hut again and continuing to live in seclusion was waiting for death. Rather than that, it was better to choose to accept a new fate. Zul finally asked, "Do you already have a comprehensive plan?" "I mean a comprehensive and foolproof plan." "Of course." Tai Long Gorfin tried to make himself appear full of confidence. Although this was a bit difficult for a dead person who had already lost his blood, he still tried to make the soul fire in his eyes burn brighter. This time, Tai Long did not press Zul. Instead, he waited patiently for him. "Tell me your plan." Zul turned and walked into his hut. But this time, Tai Long Gorfin walked in with him. Other Death Knights replaced Zul's orc guards at the door. Chapter 688. The Dark Portal, 11th of November, Hand Shopping Day. No, it was Singles Day on Earth. It was not a holiday in Azeroth, but late at night, the atmosphere in the Overwatch stronghold was tense. It was not just the Overwatch stronghold. Almost every sentry tower near the Dark Portal was on high alert. All the soldiers would take shifts every 2 hours. Hey! Corporal, wake up. It's level 1 combat readiness. Do you hear me? Below the sentry tower, an Alliance officer on horseback woke up the soldiers who were dozing off. Corporal Randall laughed. Lieutenant William, don't be so nervous. Look at the cursed land in front of us. We have been guarding it for almost 2 years, and there is nothing here that we need to seal off. Besides, isn't Pang Lei looking at it? Isn't that right, brother? Another soldier who was on the lookout next to him responded with a hmm. Although Second Lieutenant Williams' expression was not good, he could only agree. In the past 2 years, from the initial fear to the calm, nothing had happened here. There were no orcs, no demons, not even animals. Apart from the occasional gust of wind that would blow a relatively round rock to roll on the Crimson Land, there was not even a ghost here. But he still looked a little uncomfortable. Randall, perhaps you are right. He admitted, wiping his face with his gloved hand. But please be clear, even when we first arrived, Sir Marcus, the deputy commander, only gave us a level 3 combat readiness that was close to a vacation. But now it's level 1. 2 people in a team on alert at the same time, understand? From the second half of this year onwards, we can enjoy fresh seafood. What is it for? Isn't it because seafood can improve one's night vision? Otherwise, the great Lord above would not be so kind as to let me eat such fresh seafood. All right, for the sake of the freshness of the seafood. Oh. I can't imagine that the seafood that was transported from more than 1,000 kilometers away is still alive. Randall stood up and carefully used a telescope to look at the dark portal in the distance. Thanks to the development of the military industry, the telescope that was once only available to generals was now equipped with 2 in each of the 12 watchtowers surrounding the dark portal. 2 soldiers looked ahead of them. Under the light of a brazier set in a particular place. They could still clearly make out a glimmer of light in the air behind a pile of rubble. It was very narrow, about the width of a person and the height of 2 people. They had been told that the crack was a remnant of the dark portal, and that their duty was to guard it. Second Lieutenant William left with a few patrolling soldiers. Corporal Horrell spoke up. I have to say, this job is pretty easy. You get 3 times the pay of a soldier of the same rank, and all you have to do is keep an eye on an opening that won't move. If anything happened, they could just blow the alarm and escape. And we can change shifts in an hour. William was about to say something else when he stopped. His eyes that were pressed against the binoculars suddenly widened and he whispered, "Look over there." With the light from the braziers that had been set up beforehand, they could clearly see something coming out of the distorted door of light. In the light of the fire, the shadows of those things were cast on the huge wall behind the door of light that had been set up beforehand. The huge figure, with its long fangs, looked especially ferocious. Whoa, did you hear that? Horrell reminded his partner. At the same time, the green-skinned giants revealed their true faces in their field of vision. Damn it. That's Taraja's signal. We're not seeing things. It's really the Horde. Those evil green-skinned creatures are coming. William lunged at the horn hanging on the wooden sentry tower behind him. Woo, a bugle sounded. 2, 3, 12. Immediately after, a huge fire beacon was lit on the sentry tower a little further away, and a siren was sounded. Woo! Every Alliance soldier on the sentry tower, after fulfilling their duty, immediately jumped off the sentry tower as fast as they could, untied the reins of their escaping horses, and whipped them to escape. On the walls of Overwatch Stronghold, Turayan, Lothar's adjutant, was patrolling. Suddenly, he stopped and shushed the other soldiers beside him. The group of people held their breaths and stood there for 2 seconds, trying to figure out what was going on. Then, Turayan heard it. The siren in the wind sounded like the low groan of a giant beast that had just woken up. Then, it immediately turned into a warning roar. "I want the magic mirror image of the dark portal." Turayan called out to the mage who was on duty. The middle-aged mage hurriedly chanted an incantation. When the mage's eye that had been arranged beforehand sent over the image, Turayan looked at the spatial crack in the image and took a deep breath. The cold wind that seeped into his lungs almost made him lose the ability to speak. The crack was expanding. "Sound the alarm. Level 1 alert, the enemy has appeared." He waved his arms in excitement, calling out to the guard on the clock tower. But the young guard was obviously a new recruit, and he actually froze in place out of fear. "For the sake of the holy light. Don't F** King daydream at this time." Turayan could not hold it in any longer. He immediately pulled out the hammer at his waist and threw a hammer of wrath at the huge alarm. Hammer of wrath did not have any special effect on creatures or inanimate objects that were in perfect condition. But as one of the few long-range attacks of a paladin, it was more or less the same as being hit by a hammer. Dang! The loud noise finally woke the guard up. He suddenly mustered all his courage and shook the hemp rope that connected the large bell like a madman. Dang! 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 The bell of war rang. At the side of the command room of the watch fort, Andoin, who was in a light sleep, suddenly opened his eyes. His two attendants jumped up at once, and hastily tied the armor that they had prepared for their commander. When Anduin Lothar came to the command room fully armed, he found that his adjutant Turayan, Daneth Trollbane, Mirrodin Bronzebeard, Haas, and the mage representative Krasis and a large group of people were all there. "Report the situation." Turayan looked towards the west with eyes full of admiration. That was the direction of Karazhan. Deputy Commander Marcus' prediction is completely correct. The horde is here. The latest news from the bandits of MI7 is that there are confirmed Death Knights and more than 2,000 horde warriors. The preliminary judgment is, listening to Turayan's report, everyone thought that the completion of the Overwatch stronghold was really timely. Chapter 689. In the cold night, the Horde warriors who had rushed out of the dark portal heard William's horn and tried to kill the Alliance guards on sentry duty. But it was too late. Yes, they had the numbers. Unfortunately, when they rushed to the tower, they stepped on something strange. It felt like a hard iron plate. The next moment, the iron plate under their feet suddenly exploded. The exploding pig iron easily tore their bodies apart. The orcs who rushed at the front immediately fell into a pool of blood. It was late at night, and darkness covered the entire cursed land. The orc warriors could not see their enemies. Just as they were still walking around the dark portal, looking for the human sentries who had escaped, a few muffled sounds came from the darkness. Then, a dazzling light shot into the air and slowly floated down, exposing all the orcs near the dark portal to the light. The human thieves in the darkness could clearly see the orc warriors and death knights coming out of the newly expanded crack. But the thieves did not take any further action, allowing the orc tribe to control the dark portal on the side of Azeroth. Just 10 minutes later, Karazhan received a message. The one who received the magic message was Jaina, who was on duty for the second half of the night. Magic messages were also a part of magic. Even mages could not receive magic messages in their sleep, because dreams were Isera's domain. And whether Duque was asleep or not, he refused all magic messages at night. If they wanted to find Duque, they could only send a message through the mages on duty in Karazhan. Jaina rubbed her eyebrows with her slender hands. Even if I'm still a girl, staying up late is still the enemy of beauty. Jaina tilted her head and looked at herself in the mirror. Well, at 15 years old, she was even more beautiful. Her brilliant golden hair cascaded down her shoulders like a waterfall. Her beautiful oval face had a mysterious aura, and it seemed that as her magic increased, her breasts became more prominent. Jaina knew very well how tempting she was. It's a pity that my horrible teacher only orders me around like an apprentice. Jaina spat harshly before standing up and walking out of the library. She quickly climbed the 3-story spiral staircase and headed for Duque's bedroom on the top floor of the Magus Tower. Before she reached the door, the voice that drifted out from the crack of the door made Jaina's cheeks burn. Ah. 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 I can't take it anymore. Duque's godly sword is too mighty. I can't take it anymore. Go look for Sasha. This was the voice of Aurelia, the eldest sister of the Windrunner family, who usually appeared to be noble and elegant. Sasha is sleeping soundly. Please do not disturb her. This weak voice naturally came from his third sister, Sasha. Ah. Little Gianna is outside. She must have something important to do. Aurelia tried to divert Duque's attention. Since she had been exposed, Jaina could only brace herself and knock on the door. Knock, knock. After that, Jaina said, Teacher Duque, there's news from the watchtower. The door of darkness has reopened. At this time, that bastard Duque's voice floated out. Okay, got it. Tell Lothar that everything will go according to plan. After saying that, Aurelia's surprised voice rang out again. Obviously, that bastard Duque had started fighting again. Jaina was stunned. That's it? That's it? That's the third battle of the Door of Darkness. The Alliance's warriors are probably fighting on the front lines right now. You still have the nerve to mess around here? By the way, have you even considered the feelings of the rumored fiancé of the legendary Grand Duke Marcus? Do you really think I'm dead? Jaina gritted her teeth in hatred. Unfortunately, even if Duque did not say it, she knew that Duque was really determined not to marry her. It was not until Jaina was far away from the door that Duque said, Oh, sorry, I didn't pay attention just now. Ah, Jaina, you should sleep too. From tonight onwards, you don't have to be on duty anymore. We should focus on fighting the enemy. Karazhan is also the main battlefield. This is also the main battlefield? Who is the enemy? Jaina was a smart girl. She was also quite aware of the big picture. It was precisely because of this characteristic that she was fooled by Duque. She diverted her attention from the small problem that Duque did not want her and chose the Windrunner sisters. She had been with Duque for almost 2 years. Although she was a magic apprentice, she grew very quickly. Not only did she advance from the earth level to the sky level as a mage, but she also became a commander. Everything that Duque had done in the past 2 years made Jaina extremely curious. No, it should be said that everything that Duque did aroused Jaina's curiosity. Whether it was the seemingly unconstrained and self-contained planned economic system that operated perfectly, or the long supply line that seemed to exist to prove Duque's foresight time and time again, it all proved that everything that Duque did had a clear goal, and the things that he worried about would definitely come true. For example, when Jaina personally asked the strongest mage in the Alliance, Antonidas, about the reopening of the Dark Portal, he only gave a vague idea that it might open again in 5 years. This was a completely different concept from the 2 years that Duque had been waiting for. It was not 2 years. Or rather, it should be said that Duque had already accurately reached the 2 months. As Duque's disciple and secretary, the order that the watchtower would enter a level 1 state of alert starting in November was also passed on by Duque. On the surface, Duque was like a very clear and easy-to-read book. He finished reading it in a few seconds. Every action and every step of his seemed very simple, but when all of Duque's actions were combined together, no one could understand it. Even if Jaina did not want to admit it, she had to admit that there were still many things that she could learn from Duque. One day, I will learn everything from you and then teach you a good lesson. At the same time, the Alliance was teaching the Horde how to behave. The original Alliance was not good at fighting at night. At night, all formations and commands would be severely discounted, and the influence of the orcs at night was not as great as that of the humans. And the Death Knights, who did not need to use their eyes to see people, and could only rely on their souls to judge the other party, were even less affected. But now, it was indeed the Alliance who was teaching the Horde orcs how to behave. This was not the first time that Noxus had wanted to ask, can we hit the dark portal like a blind man? However, Muradin told Noxus in a very professional manner, Duque has set the shooting parameters for all the cannons in the fortress. The shooting parameters are the shooting parameters that the cannons must hit the enemy. Seeing that Anjuan Lothar was still confused, Muradin scratched his head. Anyway, even if it's night, as long as the cannons are aimed at this preset angle, they will definitely hit. Don't worry about it, you'll know once you fire. In the next moment, the 36 Longsong cannons roared in unison. Chapter 690. Whoosh, an ear-piercing whistling sound came from afar, as if the Grim Reaper was swooping down from the sky. The orc warriors who came to Azeroth for the first time did not know what was going on. The moonlight was not bright that night, so they could only look around foolishly. However, Kilrog Deadeye, the chieftain of the Blood Ring clan, who had experienced the battle at Blackrock Tower and the Scorching Canyon, had a drastic change in expression. His wrinkled face scrunched up in horror. He shouted at the top of his lungs, "Fire! Spread out! Get down!" Then he hid behind the dark portal. What the hell was firing? The rookie orc warriors did not understand, but the veteran orc beside him did. Not to mention the veteran orcs, even the Death Knights who were unafraid of normal physical attacks had to crawl on the ground in the face of this apocalyptic power, curling up like a porcupine. Only the foolish new recruits remained where they were, not knowing what to do. Some of them spread their legs as if they wanted to run out of this dangerous area. There were even some who raised their wooden shields in an attempt to block the projectiles that were, in theory, javelins and axes. Everything was in vain. They knew that the orcs would come out from the dark portal again. For 2 years, the promised battle in the field had been turned into a turret defense game. Did they really think that the crazy Duque would not do anything? No. Could. After calculating the distance between the dark portal and the historical watchtower, Duque first discovered a serious problem. The cursed land was like a kettle, surrounded by steep mountains that were difficult to climb. The original location was next to the only exit. Anyone who wanted to leave the cursed land would have to go through the double baptism of cannon fire and arrows. Moreover, the watchtower was built at the highest point of the mountain. Anyone who wanted to attack it would have to go through a painful attack. It seemed good, but the original location of the watchtower was too far from the dark portal, so far that the cannon fire of this era could not reach it. This was an absolute disadvantage. Duque also understood that using magic near the dark portal was suicidal. Once the chaotic magic energy affected the cracks in space, both sides would be doomed. Therefore, Duque's response was to expand the watchtower. It turned out that the historical Overwatch stronghold only had a single layer of walls. Moreover, when Zul led the orcs through the dark portal for the second time, the Overwatch stronghold was only the lowest level of stone castles. It was not the complete structure that was 30 years later. Duque had used the arcane puppet to speed up and change everything. The watch fortress in this world was at least 10 times larger than before. Furthermore, it had 3 concentric circles with 3 layers of walls. The innermost circle was naturally the original location of the Overwatch fortress. It stood on top of a mountain and overlooked the entire cursed land. The center circle was divided into 2 parts. Near the Swamp of Sorrows, there was a huge train yard and a series of temporary unloading yards. Close to the dark portal was a barbican-like defensive area, with a large number of inhumane defensive devices installed, such as small mage towers that specialized in enhancing a mage's magic power. The outermost ring was the layered bombardment field that occupied more than a quarter of the cursed land. There were a total of 7 levels, and between each level was a stone wall that was over 5 meters tall. Equipped with standard arrow towers, firing holes, and a large number of mortars, it was enough to equip 5,000 soldiers. The distance between each level was about 300 meters. The 36 Longsong cannons were actually railway cannons, installed on the train's skin on the tracks. Behind each Longsong cannon was a locomotive. Once the front line fell, the cannon would be pulled back along the tracks by the train. Of course, apart from the locomotive, there was also a capstan for pulling and a handrail for pushing the cart. If necessary, the dwarf cannoneers and soldiers could push the cannons back with manpower. The tracks extended all the way into the watch fortress. As long as they could be pulled back in time, they could be reinstalled on the cannons of the watch fortress and transformed into longsong cannons. These longsong cannons could be said to be the pinnacle of this era. Ha ha ha. Blast them to death. Go. Big steel cannon. Muradin laughed maniacally. The cannon that was 6 meters long and had a diameter of about 1.2 meters was called small steel cannon. Therefore, this cannon that was fixed on the train had a length of 10 meters, a diameter of 1.5 meters, and could fire a distance of 3 kilometers, was called big steel cannon. When Noxus heard the deafening sound of the cannon firing from several kilometers away, not only did his eyelids twitch wildly, even his heart was about to jump out of his chest. Only the fanatical dwarves with earplugs were jumping around the cannon, as if they were celebrating Midsummer Day. That's right. They couldn't improve the quality of the steel, but they had to increase the range and power, so they had to make the cannon barrel bigger and thicker. Originally, only a dwarf in the state of descended deity could lift the cannon, but now it would take 2 descended deity dwarves. But it didn't matter, as long as it worked. The only problem was that due to time constraints, not all 36 longsong cannons were big steel cannons. 30 of them were the small steel cannons that had been used in the Battle of Black Rock Mountain. However, when the 36 cannons fired at the same time, everyone only had one feeling: God. Bang. Crack. Crack. Although many of the longsong cannons were installed with recoil mechanisms, due to installation errors and other reasons, the rails under the cannons were destroyed in an instant. A large group of bronze-bearded dwarves had no choice but to transform, forcibly lifting the longsong cannons out and placing them on the relatively intact rails at the back. But thinking about it, just the recoil alone was so terrifying. How shocking would the power of the blast be? That's right. This was the judgment of the Alliance. This was the roar of the Grim Reaper. This was the arrival of the apocalypse. More than 80% of the 5,000 tribal elites that came out of the Door of Darkness flew into the sky immediately. Of course, the orcs and death knights couldn't fly. In the form of corpses, they were blasted hundreds of meters into the air, exploding into thousands of flesh and bone parts, and then scattered irregularly over an area of several square kilometers. Not being blasted into the sky didn't mean that they were spared death. Many orcs that were slightly further away from the Door of Darkness were hit by the indescribably huge impact, and their internal organs were shattered, blood spurting out of their mouths and noses as they died. Only those who were truly far enough away, or like Kilrog, hid behind the Door of Darkness. Those who were lucky enough to escape death didn't have it easy either. Many people felt that the world was silent, and no matter how much they screamed, they couldn't hear any echo, because they were deaf. Looking at the orc vanguard that was completely annihilated by a round of cannon fire, Azul, who had sacrificed the void demon in exchange for an extremely strong defense, was so scared that he peed his pants. No. No. No, it shouldn't be like this. It can't be like this. How could we possibly win against such a terrifying alliance? No. I want to go back. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go back. Anduin Lothar, who saw all this through the binoculars and the mage's eye, made a rare witty remark. What did Duque say? 10,000 taels of gold when the cannons are fired? Although I don't know what 10,000 taels of gold is, remember to send the bill to His Majesty Tarinas. Chapter 691. After Anduin finished sending the bill, the commanders around him smiled bitterly. What kind of business is this? Why does it sound like the heroes who guard the borders for the Alliance have become profiteers? Yet, no one had any objections. Because the Rotterdam Kingdom had not been kind in the past 2 years. At the end of the day, it was all because of Alterac. Since they had fallen out with each other, the Rotterdam Kingdom bought and annexed Alterac's land in both official and unofficial forms. The Berev family's land was confiscated by the alliance. However, the rich Rotterdam Kingdom chose to compensate the surrounding countries with money when it came to distributing the confiscated land. They kept the land prices low while exerting all kinds of political pressure. As a result, the entire Alterac Mountains were now under the Rotterdam Kingdom. Only Stanbrad, Icewind Ridge, and Hillsbrad Hills belonged to the nobles of the Rotterdam Kingdom for the time being. To everyone's surprise, Duque did not bother with the Rotterdam Kingdom on the Alterac Mountains at all. It was as if he had acquiesced to the Rotterdam Kingdom's misdeeds. No one thought that retribution would come so soon. Andoin took out a letter that Duque had written a long time ago and read it. The Alliance's highest command has informed the Rotterdam Kingdom that the Horde army broke through the Door of Darkness at 4 in the morning and is attacking the watchtower where the Southern Army is stationed. The Horde's attack is fierce, and we have retaliated with heavy cannons. We have wiped out more than 5,000 Horde soldiers in half an hour. To prevent the Horde's million-strong army from breaking through the watchtower and sailing north from the Swamp of Sorrows to the sea-watching cliff of the hinterlands, we are requesting your country to fulfill its responsibility as the leader of the alliance and allocate 5 million gold coins. The commanders covered their mouths and laughed after hearing it. Damn it, is this a notice? This is clearly a blackmail letter. Clearly telling the Rotterdam Kingdom that the war has started, and this place is too far away from you. You don't have to send troops, but you have to give me double the money. Otherwise, don't blame me for not having the money to buy cannons. Geographically speaking, the alliance was not weak at all. Because even if the Overwatch stronghold fell, there was still the newly established Riedridge Mountain stronghold at the front line of the Riedridge Mountain. Ryan personally led 70% of the Stormwind Kingdom's military forces, in addition to Reginald Windsor's Duke private army, which totaled to 120,000 soldiers. Someone asked if the Horde would attack up Wind Trail. Hee. The entire Headwind Trail was within the attack range of the Karazhan Mage Tower. In terms of magical defense, Karazhan and the Well of the Sun had the same level of defense at this time. They were even stronger than the Dalajan and Silvery Moon City. Hence, the biggest possibility of the fall of the Watchtower was what Andoin had said just now. The tribe would cross the sea and attack the hinterlands. If that was the case, who would be the one kneeling? It was either Rotterdam or Kuel Salas. In fact, when Turinas was woken up in the middle of the night, he was very upset. But when he saw the orc limbs flying in the air and the magic mirror, he was silent for a long time. That's right. The Horde was back. Looking at the map that Andoin had attached, and judging from the tribe's battle flags, Turinas could feel his stomach hurting. There were nearly 10 first-class tribes and clans written on it. Knowing that it was Duque who was robbing them, Turinas could only pinch his nose and accept it. Of course, the most infuriating thing was Duque's reminder. We will definitely attack the Horde at the Watchtower, but please be careful. According to the information provided by the Alliance's captives, the Alliance Command believes that the Warsong clan in the Tirisful Woodland and the Frostwolf clan in the Alterac Mountains, a first-class clan, will respond to the Horde's attack. Seeing this, Turinas had the urge to jump into Lake Lordamir. *CK, the Warsong clan had not been completely wiped out after 2 years. That was enough to give him a headache. Where did the first-class Frostwolf clan come from? When did this information come from? Turinas would not believe it even if he was beaten to death. This was the information he had just received. Needless to say, Duque obviously knew about it a long time ago. He didn't say it when Rotterdam took over the Alterac Mountains, and only revealed it when the Horde attacked. Alright, there were 2 first-class tribes in his backyard. Even if they were half dead, when the Horde's army arrived, the Rotterdam Kingdom would be destroyed. Was this a blackmail letter from the frontline? No. This was a scumbag blackmail letter with extra information. Turinas slammed the armrest of his throne 3 times with all his might. Even the ministers at the foot of the throne could feel the tremors. His confidant, Duke Charmas, whispered, "We have to pay for this, and not just the amount." Yes. Send my orders to double the reward to the Alliance Command Center. Let's use the Rotterdam Kingdom's treasury first. Then, whoever takes Alterac Mountain's land will be split according to their shares. Double was 10 million gold coins. Even Duke Charmas, who was used to seeing big scenes, could not help but grit his teeth when he heard this. They did not believe that Duque would give up on the watchtower that he had spent so much effort to build, but Rotterdam could not afford to gamble. Actually, 10 million gold coins was not that much for Duque. In order to upgrade their technology, the bronze-bearded dwarves, who were the main suppliers of raw materials and workers, were actually selling everything they had. If they did not build the watchtower and the Riedridge mountain fortress, they would first have to kneel to Stormwind and Cosmoden. Duque was a kind person. Since the bronze-bearded dwarves were so determined to support Stormwind, how could Duque let Magni suffer losses? Less than 5 minutes after the news of Rotterdam's promise of 10 million gold coins, Duque sent Magni an arms purchase order that was worth 5 million gold coins and was 200 pages long. In order to fulfill their duties as allies, the cannons, ammunition, soldiers, and workers provided by the Iron Furnace Castle were all free of charge. Now, in this order, Duque doubled the cost that Magni told Duque, and added a 0 before the decimal point to purchase. In the end, it was Magni who was kind enough, or perhaps he felt that it was too shameless to earn so much, that he waved his pen and said, "For the Alliance, I'll give you a 50% discount." On the other side, the Horde had no idea that there was such an exciting game within the Alliance. The Horde's vanguard almost peed their pants. Zul panicked and wanted to run back, but he was grabbed by the Death Knight Tyran Gorfiend. "Idiot. Calm down. It's too late. The dark portal has already been opened, and we have already angered the Alliance. If we go back like this, the Alliance will only rush into our world and kill us all. Completing the mission is more important." "Mission? Do we still have hope?" "Yes. Your hope is me." A sudden voice interrupted, and it was in a strange orc language. Zul looked in the direction of the voice and saw a cold-looking human standing in the middle of the Death Knights near him. Chapter 692. The Alliance's cannons bombarded the north side of the Door of Darkness, causing the earth to shake and the mountains to shake. However, the south side was still and calm, as if nothing had happened. This was because the dark portal itself was a strange existence that reinforced the crack in space. In a sense, the dark portal itself did not exist on planet Azeroth. It was a completely different dimension of matter. So even if the Alliance bombarded it with 10,000 artillery shells, it would not be able to shake the dark portal. Duque had also thought about ambushing the dark portal from 10 sides, so that every tribe that came out would die. The ideal was beautiful, but the reality was cruel. In these 2 years, he could indeed arrange it like this. The problem was that the Alliance's only supply route was in the north. If the clock was based on 12 o'clock, then if the defensive line was arranged in a circular manner, once the 3 and 9 o'clock directions were forcibly cut off by the tribe, then all the Alliance defenders in the south would die. So Duque had to let go of the south side of the cursed land. Now, when Zul and Tyran Gorfiend changed the direction of the dark portal's opening from north to south, the newly arrived tribal soldiers barely avoided being bombarded. Of course, the saturation attack that was like an earthquake still made the tribal warriors tremble in fear. They could have taken a breather, but the sudden appearance of a black-haired man who looked like a human noble scared Zul's soul away. He thought of a possibility. Did this bastard Tyran sell him to the Alliance? Fortunately, in the next moment, the black-haired man's actions made him understand the man's identity. Ha! There was a light shout. Then there was a supreme and terrifying pressure. Under Zul's gaze, the man's figure became bigger and bigger. In just the blink of an eye, his figure had covered the entire sky in Zul's field of vision. That was an incomparably huge black dragon. The huge horns, the hard scales, the thick and unshakable stratum corneum, the powerful wings, and the incomparably sharp claws all shook the hearts of Zul and all the other orc chieftains. What was going on? At this time, a creepy dry palm rested on Zul's shoulder. Zul turned his head and saw Tyran's stiff face, which seemed to be mocking him. Zul, he is the perfect plan I was talking about. What a bombshell. Compared to him, the 1-ton artillery shells that the Alliance threw out were just mediocre toys. If it stood on the tribe's side, there was no need to worry about failure. The Alliance would never have thought that their heavy artillery bombardment would instead become the perfect cover for the Black Dragon's descent. A huge explosion and a cloud of dust covered the sky, making it impossible to see anything from the north. In fact, in order to avoid accidental injuries, MI7's bandit spies had all retreated. The gigantic black dragon that seemed to cover the entire sky transformed once again. This time, he was very slow as he folded his wings and once again became that cultured and elegant human male nobleman. Tyrone walked forward and bowed respectfully to the human who had transformed into a black dragon. He then turned to Zul, Kilrog, Kargath, and the other chiefs and said, "Please allow me to introduce to all the chiefs of the tribe that this is our strongest ally in Azeroth, the leader of the Black Dragon army, Lord Nefarian." Kilrog and Kargath frowned at the same time. Kilrog seemed to have thought of something, and chose to remain silent. However, Kargath, whose personality was more irritable, bluntly said, "Hey. Wait. Why do I remember when the leader of the Black Dragon army died?" Suddenly, without any warning, Kargatha's entire body flew out with blood spurting from his nose and mouth. No one saw how Nefarian made his move, but it was obvious that this Mr. Black Dragon was in a very bad mood. His voice was still full of elegance, but there was a hint of anger in it. The era of Nefario, the wings of death, has passed. Now, the leader of the Black Dragon army is me, the great Black Dragon King, Nefarian. If Duque was here, Duque would definitely be extremely surprised. In the past, when he read novels, it was always the boss who beat up the kid. Now, he thought of a way to get rid of his old man, but the result was that the equally ambitious former Black Dragon Prince, Nefarian, took over. In a sense, the Alliance was at an advantage, because in terms of strength, Nefarian was not just a street away from his old man. From another perspective, the Alliance suffered a great loss. This was because Duque, the mastermind of the Alliance, did not know that Nefarian would jump out at this time. This was truly something that exceeded their expectations. In a situation where the big shots of the Alliance generally trusted Duque, Duque's flawless plan just had to make a mistake. This could very well be fatal. After Nefarian slightly punished Kargath Bladefist for not having eyes, he gently raised his hand. The beastmen suddenly realized that the sky was once again covered with shadows. Zul and the others suddenly raised their heads and saw that further south, along with the hazy moonlight, something was approaching. Zul discovered that there were some orange light spots flashing in the shadows that were gradually becoming larger, and they slowly turned into diamond-like shapes. Kilrog's single eye opened wide, and he realized that those orange flashes were the scorching magma flowing out of the beast's mouth, and that the deafening noise was the sound of huge wings flapping. That was an uncountable number of black dragons. The dragons swooped down, and every beastman warrior looked on in awe. When they landed, the ground beneath their feet trembled. Hot liquid flames fell from their mouths. Their glossy black scales shimmered under the starlight, and their huge claws were like polished steel. These black dragons stood on the ground or on huge rocks. For the beastmen, they had already become one with the earth, becoming huge stone statues. They were all living and incomparably deadly existences. When all the dragons had landed, they retracted their huge dragon wings and stared at the beastmen in front of them with their ebony eyes. Their heads and tails were gently swaying, and the dragon teeth in their scarlet mouths crisscrossed chaotically. From time to time, because of the friction, they would make frightening scratching sounds. The beastmen were brave. But that bravery also had a limit. For them, they could launch a suicidal charge against the human battle formation that was 10 times their size without hesitation, but they did not dare to raise the axe in their hands against the dragon army that was only 1% of their size. The feeling of being stared at by the dragons was terrible. This feeling was like a cat carefully studying its prey before eating it. Almost every beastman could not help but shiver. "My subordinates are here," Nefarian said to everyone. His tone was filled with obvious pride. The strongest creature in the entire world of Azeroth. Chapter 693. Nefarian said loudly that dragons were the strongest creatures in Azeroth. One had to know that these tribes were all country bumpkins. Before they had seen the crazy elemental lords, the titans, and the even crazier ancient gods, his words could really scare the country bumpkins. Nefarian's vanity was greatly satisfied by the orc's expressions that clearly said, "You're right, we admire you." He pointed to a particularly large black dragon with 2 huge horns on its forehead. Sabrian. When he called out the black dragon's name, the other black dragons all lowered their heads. "He's my first lieutenant. He's in charge of all matters. He and a few other companions will carry your orcs to the island you mentioned. As for the trip to Dalajan, I'll personally bring you there." None of the orcs or death knights dared to disobey Nefarian's words. Using the demon's soul to control a dragon aspect, or even an entire dragon legion, was already in the past 2 years ago. If grass could grow on Zulahid's grave, it would be at least a foot tall. In fact, the corpse of the former Dragonmaw chief was pushed into the middle of the scorching canyon along with the remains of the 200,000 orcs by the Alliance's logistics team. It was the lava fissure that the giant fire elemental Baron Geddon had emerged from. The orcs only quietly sensed and feared the power contained in every simple word of the giant dragon king that had taken human form. They watched curiously and attentively as Nefarian bypassed their new chief and directly gave orders to each of the chiefs. Compared to his father, the former Black Dragon Prince, the current Black Dragon King, Nefarian seemed to know more about the way of commanding his subordinates. Blindly pressuring them would not be able to exchange for loyalty. Even so-called obedience would be greatly reduced. Nefarian's masculine lips curled up slightly. He spoke again. "Of course, I have no intention of becoming your master. Your strong request is an exception. Now, we can only be called, so-called allies with the same interests." His words immediately made the tribal chiefs feel much better. Nefarian's smile became even more mysterious. "You won't be the only opponents of the Alliance. The Black Dragon Legion will lead you to the Tirisful Glades to find Grom Helror's Warsong clan. At the same time, I will let Brother Blackhand's Blacktooth clan dispatch troops from the Burning Steppes to attack the Reedridge Mountain and attack the Alliance's retreat." Blackhand brothers? Rend and maim. Zul was stunned by this unexpected news. Yes. After completing the quest from Great Chief Orgrim in the Mausoleum of Sardras in the Endless Sea, they came to Blackrock Mountain and foolishly occupied Blackrock Stronghold. If I hadn't shown them the right way, they would have been dead by now. Now, they are my servants. Nefarian raised his chin arrogantly. This was definitely great news for the main force of the Horde trapped in the Cursed Lands. After all, there was nothing in the Cursed Lands apart from the red soil that had lost its vitality. Even the supplies had to be transported over from Draenor. Zul really couldn't imagine what would happen if there were hundreds of thousands of beastmen crowded here. Perhaps the Alliance wouldn't even need to destroy them. They would starve to death here, or kill each other, leading to destruction. However, Nefarian's gift wasn't limited to this. Like a magic trick, he took out an item from his interspatial storage bag. When the tribal chiefs saw this thing under the hazy moonlight, they couldn't help but exclaim in unison. What did they see? The head of the great traitor of the Horde, the former warlock King Gul'dan, who was believed to have directly caused the defeat of the Alliance in the war against the Alliance. His sinister face was still frozen with a horrified expression. His life, his sins, his self-inflicted suffering, all stopped at the moment before his death. Looking at his expression, one could completely imagine the huge gap of loss and panic when he confidently wanted to steal the power of the fallen titan Sardras, only to suffer the fiercest backlash of the demon tide. No one knew how Nefarian did it, but in any case, Gul'dan's head didn't have any decay, and was presented in front of the horde in its entirety. Can I see this traitor's head? Of course. Nefarian casually tossed Ghoul Dan's head to the ground like a bag of garbage. Several Beastman Kiliarchs lit torches to make the scene more obvious. The tribal chiefs of the first-rate clans gathered in a circle and watched with angry expressions. It's him. It's definitely him. That unfilial disciple of mine, ha ha ha. Ghoul Dan. You also got your retribution. Is this what you'll get in the end? Ha 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 ha. As Ghoul Dan's former master, Zul had the absolute right to decide on the head. For a moment, the tribal chiefs burst into enthusiastic cheers. If they hadn't been beaten like dogs by the Alliance half an hour ago, they really wanted to hold a grand bonfire party to celebrate Ghoul Dan's death. Final end? No. Obviously, this great traitor of the Horde can still atone for his crimes in his own unique way. Nefarian's bewitching voice gave Zul a premonition that he couldn't refuse his next proposal. Nefarian pointed in the air, and Ghoul Dan's hideous head began to rapidly wither under the watchful eyes of all the tribal chiefs. The few hairs were the first to dry up and turn into ashes that dissipated into the air. Then, the skin and scalp attached to the skull, as well as the shriveled brain, began to fall to the ground piece by piece. Finally, what appeared in front of everyone was a hideous white-brown beastman skull. However, the thick evil and dark aura that wrapped around the skull told everyone how powerful the owner of the skull was when he was alive. This is... Zul's hands were trembling. Since this is a divine weapon made from Ghoul Dan's head, you can call it Ghoul Dan's skull. The Black Dragon King Nefarian's smile became even wider. Ha ha. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Zul couldn't hold it in anymore and raised the Ghoul Dan's skull high up in the air as he laughed maniacally. My disciple. Is this what you'll get? Even in death, you will continue to fight for the Horde. Ha ha ha. Not only Zul, but the other tribal chiefs also laughed as if they had gotten their revenge. When the orcs finished celebrating, Nefarian waved his hand. Go. Zul, the third thing you want is in Karazhan. Use your new divine weapon to destroy that weak human brat, Duke Marcus. Of course. I will go. Zul's old body seemed to have become younger with the support of this new powerful force. Chapter 694. The night grew darker. After confirming that the tribe had hidden to the south of the dark portal, Lothar ordered a halt to the bombardment that had lasted for half an hour. First, there were no more targets to bomb. Second, the most threatening shots were enough. Third, Muradin also said that if this continued, the first thing that would collapse would be the overheated cannons. Forcing the cannons to cool down would only make the quality of the cannons more likely to explode. In order to satisfy the power and range, the inhumane dwarves made the cannons very exaggerated. Of course, it would be even more exaggerated when the cannons exploded. This meant that it was very likely that an entire elite artillery team would be wiped out. Anduin sent out the largest team of bandits and a team of rangers led by Servanas to monitor the tribe. Pass the order, divide the soldiers into 4 groups and take turns until dawn. The flying soil and smoke gradually subsided, replaced by a veritable darkness. Standing on the city wall, Anduin gazed at the indescribable darkness that seemed to be dancing in the distance. Everything was basically the same as the plan had imagined. Anduin still had a faint sense of uneasiness. He fell into deep thought, thinking about the tribe's next move. The others were smart enough to keep silent. The only sounds that could be heard were the crackling of the flames and the occasional whispers of others. Suddenly, there was a sound in the darkness. Everyone jumped up, and the tension was like a taut bowstring. What's that sound? Turalian was the most sensitive. Damn it. It's a dragon. Kudrin Wildhammer was not here. The commander of the 500 Griffin Knights was a distant relative of Kudrin, Farron, and his official rank was the Brigadier General of the Alliance. Are you sure? Andoan asked nervously. I swear by Mother Earth. I've been fighting with these guys for almost a year. I'd even wake up when I hear the sound of their wings when I'm sleeping. That's right. It's a dragon. Another Griffin Knight commander, Bephalon, answered with the same certainty. Holy light above, where did the tribe get a dragon? Didn't the Red Dragon Legion return to neutrality? Turalian asked. Only Krasis' face turned green. Only dragons knew dragons the best. Although he was a red dragon who spent most of his time in the human world, his exaggerated age gave him no lack of experience in this area. He said with absolute certainty, it's not a red dragon. It's a black dragon. Krasis could tell just by listening to the sound of the dragon's wings. This was unimaginable to humans. It's like looking at a bunch of poodles. If they're all about the same size, you really can't tell the difference between them. But they knew what they were doing. Ah! Everyone was shocked when they heard this. The Black Dragon army joined the war between the Alliance and the Horde. Krasis' face was indescribably calm. If the Black Dragon Legion dares to come out on their own, then they will be seeking their own death. That's right. Nesario had been executed. But now, the Black Dragon army was still listed as an enemy by the Dragon Slumber Shrine. The world of Azeroth was so big that it would not be easy to find the Black Dragons if they wanted to hide. If they officially joined the Horde and started a war against the Alliance, it would be a different story. The four-color dragons, whose claws had long since been polished until they were shining, would definitely not mind giving their former compatriots and traitors the most vicious blows. I need a magic message to see if I can contact the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, Krasis said. Her Majesty Alexstrasza, is she busy now? Andoan asked slightly nervously. Whether there was the Red Dragon Legion as backup was crucial to the Alliance. Krasis had a slightly strange look on his face. I'm not too sure, but I heard that she is not in the Dragon Slumber Shrine at the moment. The long night finally passed, and the sky was just beginning to brighten. The big shots of the Alliance were all stunned by the scene in front of them. With the door of darkness in the east and west as the dividing line, the north was full of densely packed shell craters. The south was almost intact because a large number of large and small spatial rifts had appeared on the dividing line, and demonic creatures were constantly coming out of them. The total number of demons was not too many, probably around 1,000. From imps to void demons, from hellhounds to demon guards, they basically included all the types of demons in the middle and lower levels of the Burning Legion. The demonic creatures did not seem to have any intention of attacking. They just wandered around the spatial rift. But this was enough to make the stealth of the Alliance bandits meaningless. The senses of demonic creatures and ordinary creatures were completely different things. After several elite bandits were killed by the demonic creatures, MI7 had no choice but to give up the idea of further investigating the situation of the tribe. This was just the beginning. The Alliance soon discovered that the tribe had also begun to dig up the terrifying red soil of the cursed land along the dividing line. They piled up the soil into mountains, looking like they were going to make a long wall and confront the Alliance until the end of time. What the hell are those greenskins doing? That night, a sharp wail pierced through the silent Dalajan sky. Antonidas, who was discussing the situation of the tribe and the Alliance with Kale, Bats, jumped up. It was the sound of a magic alarm. Antonidas immediately recognized the source of it. Mysterious treasure room. He had clearly been warned by Duque, and he had also strengthened the defenses of the treasure room. He did not expect that it would still be invaded. Kale, Bat's eyes widened. The expression on his face at the moment was filled with surprise and shock, just like his mood. The mysterious treasure room was located in the center of Violet Castle. It was protected by the most powerful magic that mages had ever invented. There were many divine artifacts hidden inside, as well as some items that mages could not use but could not risk letting fall into the hands of others, such as magic artifacts. In terms of defense, it was definitely not inferior to Silvermoon City's Sunstrider Royal Treasury. How is this possible? Kale, that's muttered in his heart. He stretched out his hand for Antonidas to grasp. Without the authority of the chairman, no one could even think about teleporting in. It should have been like this. The two of them teleported to the mysterious treasure room without a word. The world around them began to blur, and Antonidas' comfortable room with its walls lined with books disappeared, replaced by a huge stone chamber. Within the area illuminated by the firelight, a man stood amidst the countless treasures. He had shiny black hair, a strong and tall figure, and a chiseled yet elegant face. Even for Kale, that's, the elf prince who was very picky about his appearance, this human in front of him could be considered very handsome. Chapter 695. He wore finely tailored clothes, and an undamaged, gem-studded long sword hung at his side. His face was slightly twisted with contempt. The man brushed his sleeves as if he wanted to wipe something off. Both he and Antonidas saw through the appearance and saw the essence of the man. They both cried out in unison. Black Dragon? Nethario? Antonidas could not be blamed for mistaking him for someone else. He could only blame the man in front of him for being almost identical to the former Lord of Pristos. However, unlike the Lord of Pristos, the man in front of him did not conceal his dragon aura at all. No, this was not concealment. This was showing off and showing off. He was younger and more arrogant. The floor and walls of the treasure room were roughly chiseled from the solid rock strata of the earth, and the ceiling was arched. There were no windows in the room, and only one door. Apart from the empty space near the exit, the rest of the room was filled with partitions, boxes, and bookcases, all of which were filled with various treasures. Amidst the dust and those items, a few people stood. Although they were in human form, Antonidas' senses detected the black aura surrounding them. But before they turned around and revealed their shining eyes under their hoods, Antonidas already knew their identities. They were the terrifying existences that once gave the Alliance the most headaches in the Horde. It was unknown whether they should be included in the biological domain, the Death Knights. Now, several Death Knights surrounded the Black Dragon who had transformed into a human man like stars surrounding the moon. This terrible situation made Antonidas, a Breaking Dawn Archmage, panic. Hee. This great existence in front of me is the new king of the Black Dragons, Nefarian. Old man, don't mistake him for someone else. Tyran Gorfiend cackled. Nefarian? Compared to his father, Nesario, Nefarian's reputation was definitely much worse. Kale, that's just frowned deeply. Only Antonidas, who had come into contact with countless confidential information, knew that Nefarian had a completely different way of doing things from his father. Rather than saying that Nefarian was a dragon, it would be better to say that he was an absolute anomaly among the dragons. There were rumors that Nefarian was collecting the corpses of different types of dragons. Compared to the capricious dragon king like Nesario who still solved problems with power, Nefarian's approach was more farsighted and mysterious. Antonidas did not know what Nefarian's high-profile appearance in the Dalajan's top-secret treasure vault meant, but the uneasiness in his heart reached its peak when Nefarian gently lifted the item in his hand. The light reflected off its facets and illuminated the entire room. Antonidas obviously knew what kind of treasure could make the Death Knights and even the Black Dragon King ignore the other treasures. Unfortunately, even though he knew that the other party was here for that thing, Antonidas still held on to the last sliver of hope. Until this moment, the eye of the Dalajan? Antonidas shouted with all his might. With boundless anger and the self-confidence of being on the home ground of the Dalajan, Antonidas fought with all his might. In an instant, he raised one hand and cast a mysterious charm. With the other hand, he summoned the other members of the Kirin Tor. The Kirin Tor chairman never fought alone. Kale, that's put one hand on his right shoulder. Almost instantly, he connected his arcane circuit with Antonidas' magic circuit for a short period of time, using his own magic to support the chairman. Another member of the Kirin Tor teleported to his side. It was an elf woman with long black hair. A long, pale hand rested on Antonidas' left shoulder, while the other hand, holding the staff, pointed at the fearsome invaders. Antonida's hair and beard moved without any wind, like a hedgehog with its spikes erected. His hair and clothes were all stretched out by the surging magic in his body. Endless ice hell. It was too fast. It was so fast that it didn't seem like ice magic. It was more like some kind of flame that could arrive in an instant. In less than a tenth of a blink of an eye, the entire treasure room was frozen with Antonidas at the center. A Death Knight tried to use dark magic to block this attack, but the wave of extreme cold directly hit the Death Knight's torso and slammed him into the wall in the distance. His chest was shattered because of the impact, but in the next moment, the pieces of armor that burst out of his chest, along with his entire body, were completely frozen under a thick layer of ice. However, the smartest Death Knights, such as Tyran Gorfiend, chose to hide behind Nefarian. In just 1/100th of a second, even the famous Nefarian would be trapped in this underground treasure room that could gather the magic of more than 300 mage towers in the Dalajan. It didn't matter if it was the Black Dragon King or a dragon aspect. With this earth-shattering magic, Antonidas dared to fight it. At this moment, Nefarian's lips curled into a smile, causing the Breaking Dawn mage's heart to skip a beat. In front of Nefarian, a smooth blue magic shield suddenly appeared. The brilliance was so beautiful that it felt as if the sweeping ice elements had collided with a huge blue dragon scale. Antonidas was so shocked that he almost bit his tongue off. For a moment, he almost thought that he was attacking the king of magic, Maligos. Before he could react, his magic was reflected back at him. The power of endless ice hell was instantly compressed, turning into a large hand made of ice fog that was reflected back at twice the speed to attack its master. Antonidas suddenly felt as if he was grabbed by a pair of cold hands, and the endless cold began to squeeze his heart. He grabbed his chest tightly with both hands, trying to overcome the pain that was like angina. In the end, the Breaking Dawn mage was able to cast a spell. A purplish red light danced around him, dispersing the cold in his body. He tried to take a deep breath, letting the cold out of his body. Fortunately, his lungs finally began to expand, his heart began to beat again, and the warm feeling returned to his body. His powerful spell saved his life, while the elf prince relied on his incomparably precious magic items to get through this difficult time. However, the female elf counselor was not so lucky. Her pale face was twisted, and her whole body fell backwards. Her black hair wrapped around her like a shroud. Anyone could see that the extreme cold had taken her life. Sahira. No. Ignoring the old mage's scream and the elf prince's angry gaze, Nefarian threw the Dalajan eye to Tyran Gorfiend as if it was a copper coin. Let's go. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.